Story 1.
I should have seen the first red flag for what it was, a giant waving blood-red banner signaling a Category 5 hurricane named Brenda. But I was 20 in love with her son Mark and hopelessly optimistic. Mark was in the military stationed 1,000 miles from my Kansas home, and our relationship was a whirlwind of letters and late-night calls. The first banner waved on Facebook. I'd posted a playful comment on Mark's wall after he'd stolen my favorite hoodie during a visit. "You're lucky. I love you, you thief. I'm going to get you back for that." A string of laughing emojis followed. Benign. Cute, even. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Mark, his voice tight with a tension I'd never heard before. "Sky, what did you post on my Facebook?" "What? Just that silly thing about the hoodie." "Why?" A heavy sigh crackled through the phone. "My mom just called my commanding officer's office. She reported that you were making threats against me online and that they needed to be aware of your unstable nature." I was silent. Not because I didn't have words, but because my brain couldn't form a single one. He continued, "My first sergeant pulled me aside. I had to explain that my fiancée wasn't planning a hit on me over a sweatshirt. That was Brenda. Before I'd even met her in person, she was trying to torpedo my life and his career over a joke. Mark brushed it off as her being overprotective. I, like an idiot, accepted that. Our first in-person meeting was a trial by fire. She sized me up from the doorway of her immaculate suburban home, her eyes scanning my simple jeans and t-shirt with unconcealed disdain. Later, while Mark was out of the room, she cornered me in the kitchen. "So you're the one," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Mark tells me you're from Kansas." "I am," I said with a smile, trying to find common ground. Her own smile vanished. "Let me give you some advice. My son is destined for great things. He doesn't need some little piece of Kansas trash dragging him down." The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, stunned, while she just turned back to chopping her vegetables as if she'd just commented on the weather. When Mark came back in, I couldn't speak. He saw the look on my face and asked what was wrong. Brenda answered for me. "Oh, we were just having a lovely girl-to-girl chat." "Weren't we, Skylar?" Her control bled into every corner of our lives. When my parents, bless their hearts, offered to buy us a washer and dryer as a wedding gift, we were ecstatic. We were young, broke, and the idea of not having to haul laundry to a laundromat felt like winning the lottery. We made the mistake of sharing our good news with Brenda. "Absolutely not," she snapped over the phone. Mark had her on speaker. "You will not accept that. It's a handout. My son does not take charity, especially not from times them, asterisk." "Mom, it's a gift," Mark argued, his voice already losing its edge. "It's a power play, Mark. They're trying to make you feel like you can't provide for her. You tell them no." We fought about it for a week. We took the washer and dryer, and for the next year, Brenda would find a way to mention it in every conversation, a constant reminder that I had forced her son to accept a handout because he couldn't stand up to me. But the tax refund, that was the moment I realized this wasn't just overprotectiveness. This was war. We filed our first taxes as a married couple, and we're getting back a few $1,000s. It was a fortune to us. We planned to pay off my clunker of a car. The day the refund hit our joint account, I was thrilled. A few hours later, I logged in to pay a bill and my stomach dropped. The balance was zero. The entire refund was gone. A single transfer. To B. Miller. Brenda. I called Mark, my voice shaking. She took it. She took all of it. He didn't believe me at first. Then he checked. The phone call that followed was epic. I could hear her screeching through the receiver. "I was just holding it for you," she yelled. "You two are children. You would have wasted it on something frivolous. I know what's best." It took threats of legal action from my dad before she wired the money back. The very next day we walked into the bank, closed that account she'd been on since Mark was 16, and opened a new one at a completely different bank. The boundary was set. A line drawn in concrete. To Brenda, it was a declaration of war. I had stolen her son and cut her out of his finances. I was the villain, the conniving little gold digger who had turned her perfect boy against her. Then came the kids. Our firstborn, a beautiful baby girl, was a new pawn in her game. Brenda, an ex-nurse who now considered herself a holistic wellness guru, launched her campaign before the pregnancy test was even dry. The phone calls were relentless. "You can't vaccinate my grandbaby, Mark. It's poison." Skylar, with her so-called medical training, is brainwashed by Big Pharma. Does she want to give the baby autism? Because that's what will happen. She emailed him debunked articles. She texted him horror stories. She preyed on his anxieties, whittling fears into his ear that I, his wife, the mother of his child, was going to willfully harm our daughter. It was a constant, draining battle that put a deep and painful crack in our marriage. The years that followed were a blur of 2 more children deployments and Brenda's escalating madness. She would tell Mark I was going to cheat on him while he was gone, that I was wasting his deployment pay. She accused me of everything under the sun, a constant venomous drip poisoning our well. Mark, worn down by years of her manipulation and struggling with his own demons from his time overseas, was trapped. He loved his mother, but he was drowning in her toxicity. Eventually, the weight became too much for him. He agreed to go to an inpatient treatment program for his PTSD. It was the hardest and bravest decision he ever made. It also meant I was alone. 3 kids, ages 5, 3, and 1 in a house 1,000 miles from any family. Just me. It was hard. It was lonely. But we were managing. I was holding our world together with duct tape and caffeine, waiting for my husband to come home healthy. One night, about a month into his treatment, I was on the phone with his Aunt Carol, Brenda's sister, and the one sane person in the Miller family. "You're doing such a good job, Skylar," she said, her voice warm. "I don't know how you're managing it all." "Some days I don't either," I laughed, exhaustion lacing my voice. There was a pause on her end. A hesitation. "What is it, Carol?" "Skylar. Honey, I don't know if I should say anything. Just tell me." Another deep breath crackled through the phone. "It's Brenda. She's been calling everyone. The whole family. She's telling them that you're the reason Mark had to go away. She's saying you're a unfit mother. That you're hurting your own children." The phone felt cold against my ear, a conduit for a poison that was finally seeping into my bones and turning them to steel. I thanked Carol, my voice a flat, dead thing, and hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I walked into the living room where my 5-year-old was building a lopsided Lego tower and my 3-year-old was coloring on a piece of paper and occasionally the floor. The baby was asleep in his crib. I looked at them, my children, my entire world that I had been holding together while their father healed, and I felt a clarity so sharp it could have cut glass. The war wasn't about a stolen hoodie, or a washer and dryer, or even a tax refund. It was about them. She was trying to use my children as the final weapon to destroy me. And I was done being a target. 2 days later, the phone rang. It was Mark. His voice sounded lighter than it had in years the therapy was working. I felt a pang of hope immediately followed by dread. "Hey, Sky," he said. "Listen, I'm getting a 7 2-hour pass. My grandpa's taken a turn and the doctors are letting me come home to see him." "Oh, Mark. I'm so sorry about your grandpa," I said, my voice softening. "Of course. When are you flying in?" "Tomorrow night." And listen, I've been thinking a lot in here. About communication, about forgiveness. I think since I'll be in town anyway, I should go see my mom. Maybe we can finally just make the peace. The steel in my bones solidified into adamantium. "You can see your mother, Mark. That's your choice." He let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Sky. That means a lot. I was thinking maybe I could swing by with the kids for an hour just so she can see them. It would mean the world to her." "No." The word was quiet, but it hung in the air between us like a guillotine. "What?" he asked, his lighter tone vanishing. What do you mean, no? I mean, no. You are free to have whatever relationship you want with your mother. I will not stop you. But she is not seeing our children. Not for an hour. Not for 5 minutes. Not ever again. Skylar, that's not fair, he protested, his voice rising. She's their grandmother. She's a viper who has spent the last month while you've been gone, and I've been alone with 3 kids, calling every member of our family to tell them I am an unfit mother who is hurting my own children. I said my voice as calm and cold as a morgue slab. She doesn't get to do that and then get a visit with those same children as a reward. The door is closed. I've locked it and thrown away the key. So you're just going to cut her out. What about the kids? Don't they deserve a grandmother? They deserve a mother who isn't being systematically destroyed by her. They deserve to not be used as pawns in her sick game. This conversation is over. I hung up before he could respond. He arrived the next night, the air in our home thick with unspoken arguments. He kissed the kids, his face a mask of strange joy, and put them to bed. As soon as the last bedroom door was shut, he turned on me. We need to talk about this, Skylar. There's nothing to talk about. I was wiping down the kitchen counter, my movements sharp and efficient. Damn it, stop that and look at me, he snapped. His voice was raw. You're being hateful and you're holding grudges. That's all this is. She's my times mother, asterisk. You want to punish her, so you're using our children to do it. I slammed the sponge into the sink and turned my eyes blazing. Punish her, a grudge. Do you have any idea how small that makes this sound? A grudge is what you hold when someone cuts you off in traffic. A grudge is for a petty disagreement. This is not that. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the kids wouldn't hear. This is a decade of sustained psychological warfare, Mark. She called my husband's military command over a joke. She called me Kansas trash. She tried to stop my parents from giving us a gift. She stole thousands of dollars from our bank account. She waged a multi-year campaign to convince you that I was going to intentionally harm our children with life-saving medicine based on her holistic bullshit. And while you were gone, getting help for the very trauma she helped inflict on you, she told our family that I was abusing our kids. I was inches from his face, now my voice, a venomous whisper. This is not a grudge. This is a diagnosis. Your mother is a narcissist with a personality disorder, and I am done letting her sickness infect this house. My only priority is protecting those 3 people sleeping down the hall. I will not offer them up as a sacrifice on the altar of your mother's ego, so you can pretend we're a happy, normal family. He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. She loves them. She would never hurt them. She is hurting them times, through me times, I countered. She has tried to destroy their mother. She has tried to break up their parents' marriage. What part of that is love? A happy, stable mother is the best thing I can give my kids, and I am never stable after being in her orbit. Therefore, she's a threat to my children's well-being. It's that simple. He just stared at me, his face a mess of confusion and anger. The programming ran deep. He saw his mother, the woman who raised him. I saw the monster who had meticulously tried to dismantle my life. They're the ones who will suffer, Sky, he said, his voice pleading. They'll miss out on having a grandmother. They will miss out on being manipulated, I corrected him. They will miss out on being told their mother is garbage. They will miss out on having love offered and then withdrawn on a whim. Believe me, they'll thank me for it later. He turned away and pulled out his phone. I knew what he was going to do. He was going to call her. To explain. To apologize for my behavior. To manage her emotions just like he'd been trained to do his whole life. I didn't say another word. I just watched him for a second, a stranger in our kitchen. Then I turned, walked down the hall, and quietly pushed open the door to my daughter's room. I checked on my other two boys, their small chests rising and falling in the dim glow of their nightlights. My job was to protect them. I went back to the living room and saw him on the couch, phone pressed to his ear, his back to me. Mom, listen. She's just stressed out. I walked right past him, scooped up the baby monitor from the end table, and went into my bedroom. I closed the door, shutting out the sound of his voice. The click of the latch was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a boundary finally holding. A wall finally being built. My revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, locked door. It was the simple, brutal, and necessary act of choosing my children and myself over the woman who had tried to burn us all to the ground. The rift between Mark and me was now a canyon, and I didn't know if we'd ever build a bridge to cross it. But for the first time in a decade, I felt safe on my side.
Story 2.
For 11 years, my life was a grayscale photograph. After my wife Sarah lost her battle with cancer, the color just drained out of everything. I went to work, I paid the bills, I raised my kids, Tom and Jane, I existed. At 54, I figured that was my lot. I'd had my great love, and now my job was to just see things through. Then I met Lacey. It was at a charity auction of all places. She was volunteering, running around with a clipboard and a smile that could power a small city. We talked for 5 minutes, and it was like someone turned the lights back on. She was funny, sharp, and had this warmth that made you feel like you'd known her for years. For the first time since Sarah, I felt alive. Bringing her home to meet the kids was the real test. Tom, my son, is 27. He lives an hour away, but he drove in just for it. He shook Lacey's hand, saw the way I looked at her, and pulled me aside while she was in the bathroom. "Dad," he said, clapping me on the shoulder, "it's about damn time. I'm happy for you." I could have cried with relief. Then, there was Jane. Jane is 24, still in grad school, and she was always her mother's shadow. They were inseparable. The 11 years since Sarah's death hadn't been a healing period for her. It was a wound she kept picking at. When Lacey held out her hand, Jane just looked at it. "Jane," I prompted, my voice tight. She finally gave Lacey a limp, two-fingered shake. "A pleasure," she said, with the same enthusiasm you'd use for a root canal. That first dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. Lacey, bless her heart, tried everything. She asked Jane about her art history program. "It's fine," Jane said, stabbing at a green bean. "Oh? What period are you focusing on?" Lacey pressed, still smiling. "The Renaissance." "How fascinating. I've always been drawn to Caravaggio. The drama in his work is just incredible." Jane looked up from her plate, her eyes like chips of ice. Mom preferred Michelangelo. She felt he had more soul. The rest of the meal went like that. Every time Lacey said something, Jane would find a way to bring up her mother, drawing a line in the sand so clear it might as well have been a brick wall. It only got worse. A few weeks later, we all went out for my birthday. Lacey gave me a beautiful, sleek silver watch. I loved it. I was taking my old one off when Jane spoke up, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Oh, retiring that old thing?" she asked, nodding at the leather-banded watch in my hand. "The one Mom gave you for your 40th? I froze. "I'm not retiring it, Janie. I'll wear both." "Of course," she said, turning her gaze to Lacey. "That's a very generous gift. Must have cost a fortune." Lacey's smile faltered. "Joshua deserved something special." "He certainly does," Jane said, and took a long, pointed sip of her wine. The implication hung in the air times, "and you're not it, asterisk." I tried talking to her alone. I'd call her, invite her for coffee. "Jane, you have to give her a chance. She makes me happy." "Does she?" she'd reply, her voice flat. "Or does she just like that you have a nice house and a healthy retirement account?" That's unfair, and you know it. Is it she's a 5-year-old yoga instructor. You're a 4-year-old executive. It's a classic story, Dad. Every conversation was a dead end. Every family get-together became a minefield. Tom saw it too. He tried to run interference, drawing Jane into conversations on the other side of the room, but she was relentless. A stray comment here, a withering glare there. She was making my life, and more importantly, Lacey's, a living hell. The breaking point came at my mother's 82nd birthday party. I told Jane that Lacey was coming. The 30 seconds of dead silence on the phone should have been my warning. The party was at my brother's house, a big loud affair with 24 relatives, a mountain of food, and a backyard full of screaming grandkids. Lacey was a champ. She mingled, she charmed my aunts, she even helped my sister-in-law carry out the cake. I watched her from across the room, my heart swelling. This was it. This was the life I wanted back. Jane arrived late wearing a black dress that seemed more appropriate for a funeral. She ignored Lacey completely, giving her a look that could curdle milk as she walked past to hug her grandmother. For the next hour, I could feel Jane's eyes on us every time Lacey and I laughed every time I put my arm around her. Then my Uncle Frank cornered me by the grill to tell me a long, rambling story about his new fishing boat. It took 20 minutes to make my escape. By the time I turned around, Lacey was gone. I scanned the living room, the kitchen, the patio. Nothing. I found her in the driveway, standing by my car, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her face was pale and her eyes were glistening. Lace. What's wrong? Are you okay? She just shook her head, not looking at me. Can we just go, Joshua? Please. Go. What happened? Nothing. I have a headache. I want to go home. I knew she was lying. I looked back at the house and saw Jane standing in the doorway watching us with a look of cold, grim satisfaction on her face. My blood went hot. It was Jane, wasn't it? I said, my voice low. What did she say to you? Lacey finally looked at me and a single tear traced a path down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. It doesn't matter. The hell it doesn't, I said, my jaw clenched. I started walking toward the house. Lacey grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. No, Joshua, don't. Please. Don't make a scene. It's your mother's birthday. Just take me home. I looked from Lacey's pleading, tear-streaked face to my daughter's triumphant smirk in the doorway. The anger in my chest felt like a physical weight. I took a deep breath, nodded, and led Lacey to the passenger side. The drive home was silent and suffocating. When we pulled into my garage, I killed the engine and turned to her. Tell me what she said. Lacey stared out the windshield. She found me when I was getting a glass of water. She told me to stop pretending, that she sees right through me. Her voice started to shake. She said I was a parasite latching onto you because you were a lonely old man with a full wallet. She said I was trying to erase her mother and that she would never ever let that happen. She finally broke, burying her face in her hands. She said she wished you had just stayed alone, that it would be better than being with someone like me. I sat there, the engine ticking as it cooled, a furious, white-hot rage building inside me. This wasn't grief anymore. This was cruelty. This was a calculated attack on a woman I loved, a woman who had done nothing but show my daughter kindness. I had let it go on for too long. I had made excuses. I had hoped it would get better. I was done hoping. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I drove across town. I parked in front of the apartment complex I paid for, walked up to the second floor, and knocked on Unit 2B. A moment later, the door swung open. Jane stood there in her pajamas, a coffee mug in her hand, a flicker of surprise in her eyes that quickly hardened into defiance. Jane, I said, my voice dangerously calm, we need to talk. Now. She stepped back, letting me pass without a word. The apartment was neat. filled with art books and half-finished canvases leaning against the walls. It was a space I'd helped her secure, a place I paid for so she could focus on her studies without worrying about rent. The irony was a bitter pill in the back of my throat. She closed the door and leaned against it, crossing her arms. What? Don't play dumb, Jane. You know what. What you said to Lacey yesterday. A small, humorless smile touched her lips. I just told her the truth. Someone had to. The sheer audacity of it sent a fresh wave of anger through me. The truth. You ambushed a guest at your grandmother's birthday party and called her a parasite. You made her cry. You call that the truth? I call it protecting my family, she shot back, her voice rising. She's not one of us. She's a replacement. You look at her and you're trying so hard to see Mom, and it's pathetic. This has nothing to do with your mother, I said, my voice dangerously low. It has everything to do with her. Jane's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. You think you can just slot someone else into her life, into her home, into her family? 11 years, Dad. That's all it took for you to decide her memory wasn't enough for you anymore. Every word was a twisting knife. Your mother is gone, Jane. I loved her more than my own life, and I will miss her every single day until I die. But I am not dead. I am allowed to be happy. And you have no right, none, to sabotage that. Happy, she laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You're not happy, you're just lonely. And she saw you coming from a mile away. A sad, rich widower. The perfect mark. Do you really think she loves you? Or does she love the security, the trips, the nice dinners, the fact that she doesn't have to worry about money for the rest of her life? That was it. That was the line. All the patience, all the understanding I had tried to hold on to it, all evaporated. You'd rather I just withered away, wouldn't you? I asked, stepping toward her. You'd rather I just sat alone in that big house for the next 30 years, miserable, just to prove how much I loved your mother. Her eyes blazed with a tearful, righteous fury. Yes, I would. That would be better than watching you make a fool of yourself with some woman who's only after your money. I stopped a foot from her, the silence in the room crackling. I'd come here to reason with her to make her see the pain she was causing. But I saw now that she didn't care about the pain. She was wielding it like a weapon. Okay, I said, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion. I'm done. I am done with the insults, the glares, the cruelty. I am done letting you hurt a good woman who has done nothing but try to be kind to you. I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She expected me to yell, to argue. She didn't expect this cold finality. Here's how this is going to work, I continued, my voice steady. You will treat Lacey with basic human civility. You don't have to like her. You don't have to be her best friend. But you will stop the snide comments. You will stop the accusations. You will be polite. If you see her, you will say hello. You will treat her with the same basic respect you would show a stranger on the street. Jane stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. You can't be serious. I'm deadly serious. You will do that, or this all stops. I gestured around the apartment. The rent? The tuition for your master's program? The monthly allowance I put in your bank account? It all ends. Immediately. Her face went from defiant to aghast. You would cut me off for times her asterisk. No, I said the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I would cut you off for you. For the hateful, cruel person you've become. You are using your mother's memory as an excuse to be a bully, and it's over. The choice is yours, Jane. Civility or self-sufficiency. For a moment, she looked like she might shatter. I saw the little girl I used to push on the swings, the teenager I taught to drive. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a mask of pure contempt. You're an idiot, she spat, her voice trembling with rage. She's already turned you against your own daughter. I hope you're happy. She yanked the door open. "Get out." I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out, the slam of the door behind me echoing the one that had just closed in my heart. The drive home was a blur. I sat in my quiet house, the silence, a heavy blanket. The watch Lacey gave me felt heavy on my wrist. I felt sick. I had just leveraged my love for my daughter against her financial survival. What kind of father does that? My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Tom. I knew it would be. I let it ring 4 times before finally answering. "Dad," his voice was tight with concern. "I just talked to Jane." "Then you know," I said, my voice weary. "She's a wreck." She said, "You're cutting her off." "I gave her a choice, Tom." "A choice, Dad? That wasn't a choice. That was an ultimatum. You can't hold her education over her head like that." "It's not fair." "You know what's not fair?" I snapped my composure, finally cracking. "It's not fair what she did to Lacey. It's not fair that I have to watch the woman I love get torn apart by my own daughter." She cornered her, Tom. She called her a gold-digging parasite. When does it stop? There was a pause on the line. "I know she went too far," he said, his voice softer now. "I'm not defending what she said. But Dad, you have to understand where she's coming from. It's been you and us for 11 years. For almost her entire adult life. Seeing you with someone else, it's like she's losing Mom all over again. She just needs more time." "How much more time, Tom?" I asked, rubbing my tired eyes. "Another year, another decade. Am I supposed to put my life on hold indefinitely while she refuses to process her grief? Lacey doesn't deserve this. I don't deserve this. I know. But threatening her financially, that's a hell of a way to handle it. You just poured gasoline on the fire." He was right. I knew he was right. I had escalated things to a point of no return. But sitting there listening to the echo of Jane's insults and picturing Lacey's tear-streaked face, I couldn't see another way. We talked for a few more minutes, but the conversation went nowhere. He thought I was being a tyrant. I thought he was enabling Jane's toxic behavior. After we hung up, I just sat there staring at a framed photo on the mantel. It was of Sarah Jane and Tom taken on a beach vacation a year before she got sick. They were all smiling, happy. A lifetime ago. I did it to protect Lacey. I did it to force a change. But as the doubt began to creep in, cold and sharp, I had to ask myself the question that was now screaming in my head. By using my money as a weapon to demand respect from my new partner, did I just become the asshole?
Story 3.
The key in my hand felt heavier than it was. Not just a piece of brass, but a 30-year mortgage, a testament to surviving my 20s and the official deed to my own little patch of quiet. For the first time in my 27 years, I had a front door I could lock against the world. Against my family. Specifically against my Uncle Frank. Frank is 53, and for every one of those years, he's been a walking, talking black hole of a man. The family lore is that he fell out of a tree when he was 9 and suffered a mild brain injury. There's no medical record of this, of course. No doctor's note. Just a convenient all-purpose excuse handed down through the generations to explain away a lifetime of being a world-class asshole. It's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card. Frank screaming at a waitress times the injury. Asterisk. Frank's making my cousin cry at her own wedding times. Remember what he went through. Asterisk. Frank's telling me I'll never amount to anything times. He doesn't mean it, Gavin. It's just the thing with his head. Asterisk. So when I planned the housewarming party, a celebration of my new Frank-proof fortress, he was pointedly, specifically, and deliberately not on the guest list. My mistake was telling my dad. "Sounds great, son," he'd said over the phone 2 days before the party. Your mother and I are so proud. We'll be there. Oh, and I'll pick up Frank on the way. The line went silent. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of a clock, the sound of my sanctuary's walls dissolving into sand. No, I said. What do you mean, no? I mean, no, you will not be picking up Frank. He's not invited. Gavin, don't be like that, he said, his voice shifting into that familiar wheedling tone of the professional enabler. It's a family party. He's your uncle. It's times my times party and times my times house. And my one house rule is, no assholes allowed. Frank is the king of them. A heavy sigh crackled through the phone. You know how he is. That thing that happened when he was a kid, it's hard for him. This would mean a lot. It would mean a lot to Times you, Times Dad. It would mean you don't have to deal with his whining about being left out. I'm not doing it. The answer is no. I thought I'd won. I really did. I thought for once the door I'd locked would actually stay shut. The day of the party was perfect. Chloe, my girlfriend of 3 years, had orchestrated the whole thing with the precision of a drill sergeant. She'd strung fairy lights across the new deck I'd built. She'd curated a playlist that was just the right mix of chill and upbeat. The air smelled like grilled burgers and freshly cut grass. My friends were there, my mom was beaming, and for a few hours my house felt like a home. A real one. My mom pulled me aside by the kitchen island, her hand warm on my arm. It's a beautiful home, sweetie. You and Chloe have done such a good job. She glanced toward the front door, a flicker of anxiety in her eyes. Your father isn't... He didn't. I told him no, Mom. Firmly. She nodded, but the relief on her face was temporary, like a sunbeam in a hurricane. She knew her husband, and she knew her brother-in-law. Around 8 o'clock, just as the sun was setting and the party was hitting its stride, my dad's sedan pulled into the driveway. My stomach turned to ice. He got out of the driver's side, and then the passenger door opened. Out climbed Uncle Frank. He was dressed like he was attending a parole hearing, stained polo shirt, pleated khakis that had given up the ghost years ago. He surveyed my house, my little blue Cape Cod that I'd poured my entire life savings into, with a sneer that could curdle milk. My dad caught my eyes. They walked up the path, giving me a weak apologetic shrug as if to say, Times, what could I do, asterisk? Frank didn't even say hello. He stepped through the front door, my front door, and his first words were, Jesus, Gavin. It's a bit of a dive, isn't it? He said it loudly. Loud enough for the music to feel like it dipped. Loud enough for a few of my friends to turn their heads. I felt my dad's hand on my shoulder. He's just kidding, son, he muttered, a desperate plea in his voice. Frank ignored him and bulldozed his way to the beer cooler, grabbing one without looking. He took a long swig and continued his tour of insults. Paint job's a little sloppy in that corner, he said, pointing at the living room wall. And these floors, laminate tisk. Should have gone with real hardwood. I just stood there, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I could feel Chloe's presence next to me, a silent, supportive anchor. Every comment was a rock thrown through my window. Every sneer was a scratch down the new paint. This wasn't just my house he was attacking. It was my life. My accomplishment. My future with the woman I loved. He made his way onto the deck where Chloe had been laughing with her friends. The laughter died as he approached. He looked them all up and down, his eyes finally landing on Chloe. He gave her a slow, deliberate once-over, a greasy appraisal that made my skin crawl. You must be the girlfriend, he slurred. He hadn't been here 10 minutes and he was already half drunk. Chloe, ever the diplomat, forced a smile. I'm Chloe. It's nice to finally meet you. Frank, he grunted. He took another swig of his beer, then gestured with the bottle back towards me where I stood frozen in the doorway. I gotta ask, he said, his voice carrying across the now quiet deck. I'm just curious. What's a pretty little thing like you doing with a loser like him? The world stopped. The fairy lights, the music, the scent of summer, it all just vanished. There was only the stunned, horrified silence of our friends and the ugly, triumphant smirk on my uncle's face. He'd found the one button he knew I couldn't ignore. He hadn't just insulted my house anymore. He'd brought his poison into the heart of my home and aimed it directly at Chloe. I saw her face. The brilliant smile she always wore faltered just for a second, but I saw it. I saw the hurt. And in that instant, something inside me, a chain I'd been wearing my whole life, finally snapped. My dad was already moving, starting his usual routine. "Frank, that's enough. Come on, let's get you a burger." I put a hand on my dad's chest, stopping him cold. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at Chloe or my friends or my mother, whose face was a mask of dread. My eyes were locked on one person. The low, dangerous calm in my own voice surprised me. "Uncle Frank, come here." I grabbed his bicep. His arm was surprisingly soft, flabby under the stained polo shirt. He tried to pull back, but he was drunk and I was fueled by a type of white-hot clarity I'd never felt before. "We're going to have a chat." I dragged him off the deck, past the stunned faces of my friends, through my new living room, and right out the front door I had been so proud of. I didn't stop until we were on the lawn under the harsh glare of the porch light. The party music sounded distant now. "What the hell is your problem?" he slurred, yanking his arm free. "No, what is Times? Your Times problem," I shot back, my voice low and shaking with fury. "For my entire life, my entire goddamn life, I have watched you terrorize every single person in this family. I have watched you make my mom cry, my cousins hide, and my dad invent 1,000 pathetic excuses for you. I got an injury. Stop." I put a hand up, cutting him off. The word was a blade. "Do not say it. Do not use that pathetic 30-year-old lie. There is nothing wrong with your brain that being a decent human being wouldn't fix. You're not injured, Frank. You're just a mean, bitter bully, and you've been getting away with it for far too long." He looked genuinely shocked, his jaw slack. It was like watching a cartoon character get hit with an anvil. He had no script for this. "You came into my home," I continued, stepping closer, my voice getting louder. "A home I worked my ass off for. A place Chloe and I built together. And with your first breath, you tried to burn it down. You insulted my house, you insulted my life, and then you insulted her. You don't get to do that." "I was just joking around," he sputtered, finally finding his voice. "Was it a joke when you told my cousin her husband would probably leave her within a year? Was it a joke when you told me I'd be working dead-end jobs for the rest of my life? It's never a joke, Frank. It's poison. And you are done spewing it around me." I pointed a finger at his chest. "Here's the new reality. You have two options. Option 1, you walk back onto that deck, you find Chloe, and you apologize to her. A real apology. And then for the rest of the night, you sit in a chair and you don't say a single goddamn word to anyone. Option 2, you get your ass off my property right now and you never ever come back. You will not be invited to my wedding. You will never meet my kids. We are done. For good. Choose." He stared at me, his face turning a blotchy red. The shock was curdling into his usual rage. I could see the gears turning, the calculation of how to twist this, how to make himself the victim. An apology was out of the question. It would be an admission of fault, a crack in his armor of assholery. "You can't talk to me like this," he snarled. "I'm your uncle." "You're a guest in my house who just insulted my girlfriend," I countered, my voice flat and cold. "The title uncle doesn't grant you a lifetime pass to be cruel. Time's up. What's it going to be?" He gave a theatrical, disgusted sigh. He looked back at the house, at the warm lights, and the silhouettes of people who were happy without him. He couldn't stand it. "Fine," he spat. "I'm leaving." He turned and stomped toward the driveway, fumbling in his pocket for his phone. He didn't look back. I watched him go, my whole body trembling. I waited until I heard my dad's car door slam shut. The engine started and the headlights cut a path across my lawn before the car screeched out onto the street. The silence he left behind was deafening. I took a deep breath and walked back inside. Every eye was on me. The music had been turned down. My dad stood by the doorway, his face pale and etched with panic. "Gavin, what did you do?" "I did what you should have done 30 years ago," I said, my voice hoarse. "I walked right past him." Chloe met me in the middle of the room. She put her hands on my arms, her eyes searching mine. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," I breathed, a genuine smile, finally breaking through. "Yeah, I think I am." My mom came over and hugged me tight. "Thank you," she whispered in my ear so only I could hear. "Oh, Gavin, thank you." That was the moment the first phone buzzed. It was my friend Mark across the room. He glanced down at his phone, a confused look on his face. Then another buzz. One of Chloe's friends. Then Chloe's phone in her back pocket. Then mine. I pulled it out. A text from my Aunt Carol Frank's sister. Asterisk. Carol. "What did you do to Frank? He's hysterical. Said you attacked him and threw him out for no reason. I can't believe you'd be so cruel. You know he's sensitive because of his injury." Asterisk. My blood ran cold. The retaliation had begun. Chloe read the text over my shoulder. Her phone was lighting up with notifications from a family group chat I wasn't in. She showed me the screen. My cousin Megan times Frank just texted Dad. He says Gavin went crazy on him. Called him a bunch of names in front of everyone. Asterisk. My Uncle Robert times. Unbelievable. After all, Frank has been through. Gavin's always been arrogant? Asterisk. A war was being declared, and Frank was launching his offensive from the passenger seat of my dad's car. He was reframing the narrative in real time, painting himself as the wounded party, and me as the unhinged, ungrateful nephew. My dad was now on his phone, his back to me. I could hear his hushed, frantic tones. No, he just overreacted. Frank, just calm down. I'll talk to him. He was already doing damage control. For Frank. The party was effectively over. My friends, blessed them, tried to restart the music to keep the mood light, but the schism was palpable. The air was thick with it. Within minutes, the battle lines were drawn. My dad's side of the family, the enablers, the peacekeepers, the ones who had spent a lifetime building Frank's protective bubble, were firing off texts, calling each other, consolidating their support for the victim. My mom, on the other hand, stood by my side, a silent, steely sentinel. My friends gathered around, offering me beers and quiet words of support. "Dude, he was a total jerk. You did the right thing." Chloe wrapped her arm around my waist, a gesture of unwavering solidarity. "Let them talk," she said, her voice firm. "We know what happened." I looked around my new home. The fairy lights were still twinkling on the deck. The smell of burgers still hung in the air. But the quiet I'd bought was gone. The fortress I thought I'd built had been breached not by Frank, but by the toxic system that protected him. By kicking him out, I hadn't just removed one man from my party. I had taken a sledgehammer to the very foundation of my family. The rift was massive, and it was immediate. And looking at Chloe, feeling my mom's hand on my back, I knew it was a war I was supposed to have started long ago. The cost would be high, but for the first time standing in the wreckage, I felt free.
Story 4.
It all started when Chloe lost her job in July. 9 years we'd been together, engaged for 2. We had a rhythm, a life built brick by brick. Then the marketing firm downsized, and suddenly her rhythm was gone. She started going out more, reconnecting with friends, she said. I didn't think much of it. She was hurting. She needed a distraction. The first crack appeared in August. A weird text on her phone, a name I didn't recognize. When I asked, her face went pale. It's nothing, she said, snatching the phone back. Just an old colleague. But her hands were shaking. That night, she broke down crying. I have to tell you something, she sobbed into my chest. I kissed someone. My world tilted. Kiss someone, just a kiss. A stupid, drunken mistake at a bar, she swore. She was lost, feeling worthless after the layoff, and this guy gave her attention. It hurt like hell, but 9 years is a long time. People make mistakes. We could fix this. Is that it? I asked, my voice tight. Just a kiss. Yes, she whispered, her eyes wide and pleading. I swear. It meant nothing. I love you. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. A week later, the story changed. It wasn't just a kiss. They'd gone on a date. Maybe 2. I was just so lonely, she explained, twisting the ring I gave her around her finger. We just talked. That's all. Another week, another piece of the puzzle. They had slept together. Once. Just once, she insisted, tears streaming down her face again. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I stopped it right after. It's over, Silas. I promise you it's over. That was our first D-Day in early September. A full confession, I thought. The rock bottom from which we could rebuild. We talked for hours. I yelled, I cried, I asked a million questions. She answered them all with what seemed like brutal honesty. He was a mistake. A symptom of her depression. She chose me. She chose us. We agreed to marriage counseling. We agreed to a clean slate. For a few weeks, things felt almost normal. She was more attentive, more affectionate. She was trying. I was trying. Then she announced a trip. A solo trip to clear her head. She was going to visit an old college friend in Portugal for a week. I need this, sighed, she said, her hands on my cheeks. To find myself again. To be the woman you deserve when I come back. I was hesitant, but I agreed. It felt like a test of trust. A grand gesture to prove I was all in on fixing us. She sent me pictures from Lisbon, cobblestone streets, beautiful sunsets, smiling selfies of just her. Missing you like crazy, the text read. Can't wait to come home to you. But when she got back, something was still off. A distance I couldn't bridge. She was secretive, with her phone jumping if I walked into the room while she was texting. She started staying late at the library, working on her resume, she said. I felt a familiar knot tightening in my gut, but I pushed it down. I was being paranoid. We were healing. The breaking point didn't come from a text message or a suspicious phone call. It came from our shared laptop. I was looking for an old tax return, digging through the folders on the desktop. My mouse hovered over a folder named Summer Fun. I figured it was photos from our trip to the lake in June. I clicked. It wasn't our lake trip. The first things I saw were PDF files, Airbnb receipts. One for a cozy apartment in Lisbon, Portugal. Booked for 2 adults. Another for a weekend getaway upstate. From 2 weeks ago. The dates lined up perfectly with her solo trip and a weekend she'd supposedly spent with her sister. My heart started hammering against my ribs. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked on another folder inside this one labeled Pics. There she was. My Chloe. Her arm was slung around another man's shoulder, a stupid grin on his face. They were standing in front of a landmark I recognized from the photos she'd sent me from Portugal. Another picture showed them at a candlelit dinner clinking wine glasses. He was the guy from the text message. The one-time mistake. I kept clicking, my hand trembling. Each photo was a fresh stab to the gut. There they were, hiking upstate, the autumn leaves a brilliant orange behind them. And then I saw it. The one that shattered everything. A selfie dated last Saturday. The day she was supposedly at the library all night. They were in a car, her head on his shoulder, and he was kissing her cheek. She was smiling. A genuine, unguarded, happy smile. The kind she hadn't given me in months. The sadness I'd been drowning in for months vanished. It didn't just fade, it was burned away by a sudden white-hot rage. The trickle of truth wasn't a confession. It was a strategy. A way to manage my reaction to keep me on the hook while she lived a completely separate life. All the tears, the promises, the I choose you speeches, it was all a performance. I stood up from the computer, my body feeling strangely calm, detached. The 9 years we'd built together crumbled into dust in that single moment. There was nothing left to save. There was nothing left to fix. I walked over to the window and stared out at the city lights, the life we were supposed to share. For the first time in months, I wasn't confused or heartbroken. I was just done. I pulled out my phone. My thumb moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. First, I called my brother. Then my parents. I told them everything. The whole ugly, unvarnished truth. They were shocked, furious, supportive. It was the easiest conversation I'd ever had. After I hung up, I opened a new text message. Her name, Chloe, stared back at me from the screen. I deleted the heart. Then I started to type. I found the folder, Chloe. Come get your things. We're done. I hit send. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. The words looked cold and alien on the screen, but they felt like the first honest thing I'd said in months. Her reply was almost instant. A series of question marks. Then, what folder? See, what's going on? Call me. I ignored it. I walked into our bedroom my times bedroom, and pulled 2 empty suitcases from the top of the closet. I opened them on the bed and began methodically taking her clothes from the hangers, folding them neatly and placing them inside. The scent of her perfume, a scent that used to feel like home, now smelled like a stranger's. An hour later, I heard her key in the lock. The door opened, and she stepped inside her face, a mask of worried confusion. Silas, what the hell was that text I've been calling you? I didn't look up from packing her drawer of sweaters. It's exactly what it sounds like, I said, my voice flat. The folder on the laptop. Summer fun. Portugal. Last weekend. All of it. I know. Her face went from confused to ghostly white. The performance began immediately. Her eyes welled up, her lower lip trembled. Oh, baby, no. It's not what you think. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said, zipping the first suitcase shut and placing it by the bedroom door. You've been explaining for months. It was all bullshit. It wasn't bullshit, she shrieked, her voice cracking. I love you. He was a mistake. I was weak. You flew across the ocean with your mistake. I cut her off, my voice rising for the first time. You spent last weekend with him while telling me you were at the library. The lies, Chloe. The sheer number of them. It's sociopathic. She started to sob the full-body, gut-wrenching sobs I had fallen for every single time before. But now, it was like watching a movie with the sound off. I felt nothing. My mom and dad are on their way over, I said calmly, starting on the second suitcase. My brother too. They're going to help me move your stuff into a storage unit. That's what broke her. The tears stopped instantly. Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure fury. You told your times, family times, she spat the word family, dripping with venom. They deserved to know why the wedding was off. You had no right, she screamed, her face contorting. That was our private business. You did that just to humiliate me. She stormed past me, grabbing a handful of my shirts from the closet. She marched to the front door, wrenched it open, and threw them out into the hallway. "You want to see humiliating?" she yelled, grabbing another armful. "T-shirts, a jacket, a pair of jeans I loved." All of it went flying. "This is your time's fault. You know that. 9 years and you couldn't even be bothered to fuck me right anymore. You were boring. You were never spontaneous, never exciting. Of course I looked for it somewhere else." I just stood there watching her. It was incredible. Not a single apology. Not a shred of remorse. Just pure uncut rage that I had discovered her game and ruined her fun. "You were so wrapped up in your stupid job, you barely even noticed I was gone," she continued, her voice ragged. "You pushed me away, Silas. You pushed me right to him." She grabbed the framed photo of us from the nightstand, the one from our engagement party. For a second, I thought she was going to smash it. Instead, she stared at it, her face twisting again, this time into something that looked like pain. She threw it into one of her suitcases and slammed the lid shut. "Fine," she hissed, grabbing her bags. "I'll go. But you'll regret this. You'll be miserable without me." She dragged the suitcases out the door, leaving my clothes strewn across the hallway floor. The door slammed shut behind her and the apartment fell into a deafening silence. I stood there for a long moment, then slowly walked out and began picking up my shirts. I wasn't miserable. I was free. The first few weeks were a barrage. Late-night texts filled with a cocktail of apologies and accusations. Asterisk 117 a.m. "I can't sleep. The bed feels so empty." Asterisk. Asterisk 122 a.m. "You didn't even fight for us. 9 years and you just threw it away." Asterisk. Asterisk 2:05 a.m. "Please, Silas. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut him off forever. I'll tell you everything." Asterisk. But she never did. When I broke my no-contact rule once, foolishly demanding the unvarnished truth as a condition for even speaking to her, she gave me the same old story. It was just a few times. It meant nothing. The lies were so ingrained, she couldn't even tell the truth. When there was nothing left to lose. I blocked her number. I started therapy. My therapist called it reclaiming the narrative. I wasn't the boring, inadequate man she painted me as in her final desperate attack. I was a man who had been systematically deceived by a person he trusted with his entire world. Slowly, life started to come back in color. I reconnected with friends. I went to the gym. I even went on a few dates. They were awkward and strange, but they were also a reminder that there was a world outside the wreckage Chloe had left behind. About 4 months later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello." See. It was her. Her voice was thick, with tears broken. I didn't know who else to call. I waited, saying nothing. The silence on the line was heavy. "I lost my new job," she finally choked out. "They had another round of layoffs. It's just like before. I don't know what to do." And there it was. The full circle moment. The same catalyst that started her affair happening all over again. A year ago, this call would have sent me rushing to her side, ready to comfort and fix and save. I braced myself for the expected wave of pity or anger or some lingering echo of love. But nothing came. I felt a profound, unnerving, and deeply peaceful indifference. The person on the other end of the line was a stranger telling me a sad story that had nothing to do with me. The emotional charge was gone. The wires had been cut. "I'm sorry to hear that, Chloe," I said, and my voice was even calm. "I hope things work out for you. She started to say my name again, her voice pleading, but I didn't let her finish. Goodbye. I ended the call and blocked the number. I looked out my window at the same city lights I'd stared at the night I found the folder. Back then they felt like a monument to a life I had lost. Now they just looked like a city full of possibilities. And for the first time in a very long time, I was excited to see what came next.
Story 5.
My apartment is my masterpiece. It's not much a 400 square foot box with a kitchen the size of a closet, but it's mine. I found it for a steal, a little rent-controlled gem my friends are still jealous of. I spent months turning it into a home. I painted the walls a soft sage green, strung fairy lights around the window, and filled it with thrifted furniture. I painstakingly sanded and refinished myself. It was my sanctuary, the one place in the world that was entirely, unequivocally mine. Then my brother Mark decided it was also his. It started small. Mark is 32, 9 years older than me, and still lives in his childhood bedroom at our parents' house. He'd just started a new job working a night shift at a warehouse an hour away. "Hey Vic," he texted one morning. "Mind if I crash on your couch for a bit? The drive back is brutal when I'm this tired." What was I supposed to say? No, so I said yes. He came over, slept for 5 hours, and left. No big deal. But a week later, it was the same request. And then again. Soon crashing for a bit became a 3 days a week habit. I gave him a key because I was tired of getting buzzed at 7 in the morning. I thought it was a gesture of trust. For him, it was an invitation. The first real sign of the invasion was the PlayStation. I came home from work one Tuesday to find it squatting under my TV, a tangle of black cables snaking behind my carefully organized media console. "What's this?" I asked, pointing at it. Mark was already on the couch, controller in hand. He didn't look up. Easier than lugging it back and forth. "You don't mind, right?" It wasn't a question. I did mind. I minded a lot. But I swallowed the protest. I didn't want to be the difficult sister. That was my fatal mistake. The PlayStation was the Trojan horse. Once it was inside, the rest of his army followed. A duffel bag of clothes appeared in my closet. His massive stinking work boots were permanently parked by the door, tripping me every time I came in. The bathroom counter, once neatly arranged with my things, was now a chaotic landscape of his deodorant, shaving cream, and a perpetually damp towel slung over the door. He never paid for anything. He'd drink my coffee, eat my food, use my Wi-Fi, and finish my toilet paper without ever replacing it. My electric bill mysteriously doubled. He was a ghost who paid no rent but left a very real, very greasy mess. I started to feel less like a homeowner and more like a live-in maid. I'd come home from a long day to find a sink full of crusty bowls caked with old cereal milk and his dirty work clothes balled up on my bedroom floor. "Mark, can you please clean up after yourself?" I'd ask, trying to keep the exhaustion out of my voice. Yeah, I'll get to it," he'd grunt, eyes glued to the TV screen where he was gunning down zombies. He never got to it. The final straw was the night I came home to find him and 2 of his friends on my couch, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and beer bottles. The entire apartment reeked of stale beer and dude. They were screaming at the game, and my cat, Nimbus, was hiding under my bed, terrified. "What is this?" I snapped, dropping my purse on the floor. Mark finally looked at me, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "What? We're just chillin'." "This is my apartment, Mark, not a frat house. You can't just have people over without asking me." He actually rolled his eyes. "Relax, Vic. It's not a big deal." That was it. I was done. The next morning I called my parents. I was shaking with a mixture of anger and anxiety. I just wanted some backup. I wanted them to be parents to talk to their son and tell him to respect my home. Mom answered. I laid it all out for her, the mess, the noise, the disrespect, the friends. I could hear her sighing through the phone. "Oh, honey, you know how he is," she said, her voice dripping with practice weariness. "Just try to be patient with him." "Patient, Mom. He's treating my home like his personal flop house. He needs to go." "Hold on, let me put your father on." I heard muffled talking, and then my dad's voice calm and reasonable. That's his signature move. The voice of reason that makes you feel like you're the crazy one. "Victoria," he started. "Your mother told me what's going on. And we've actually been talking. We have an idea." I felt a surge of relief. Finally. "Okay." "Well," he said, drawing the word out, "Mark really likes your little place. And the rent is so cheap. You've done so well for yourself, sweetie. You've got that great job, you're so responsible." A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. I knew where this was going. "What are you saying, Dad?" "We were thinking, since you're so much more established, maybe you could find a new place, something a little nicer, and Mark could just take over your lease." The phone felt slick in my hand. I couldn't have heard him right. "You want me to move out of my own apartment?" "It just makes sense," he said, his voice becoming more animated, like he was selling me a used car. "Mark's struggling. He needs a leg up. You're strong. You can handle a little bit of a rent increase. It would be a huge favor to him. And frankly, a huge favor to us." It's time he was out of our house. I was speechless. The silence stretched. He had just admitted it. This wasn't about helping Mark. This was about solving their problem. I was just a convenient, disposable tool. "So you want to make me homeless so you can get rid of my brother." My voice was dangerously quiet. "Don't be so dramatic, Victoria," he scoffed. "You wouldn't be homeless. You'd find another place. You're the golden child. You always land on your feet." "He doesn't. This is a chance for you to help your family." My family. He meant help him and Mom get their empty nest back. He meant sacrifice my home, my peace, my financial stability, which I had worked my ass off for, all so they could wash their hands of the 32-year-old man-child they'd created. I was being punished for my success. "No," I said. The word felt solid heavy. "Absolutely not. Victoria, don't be selfish." I hung up. My hands were trembling. My sanctuary, my home felt tainted. It wasn't just Mark's mess anymore. It was the scene of my family's utter betrayal. Furious and needing to know I wasn't insane, I typed out the whole story on a Reddit forum. The anonymous rage of the internet was a balm. Hundreds of comments flooded in within an hour. Asterisk, change the locks. Asterisk, asterisk, he's a squatter. Asterisk, asterisk, your parents are the real villains here. Asterisk, asterisk, you are not their doormat. Asterisk. Something inside me snapped into place. The hurt and confusion hardened into pure cold resolve. They wanted me to be the bad guy. Fine. I grabbed a box of black trash bags from under the sink. I marched into the living room and ripped the PlayStation's cords from the back of my TV. I shoved it into the first bag. The controllers went in next. Then the mess of games. I moved through the apartment like a storm gathering, every single thing that belonged to him, the dirty clothes, the toiletries, the stinking boots. It all went into the bags. I dragged the 5 heavy bags and piled them by the front door. I looked around my apartment. It was mine again. The air already felt lighter. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Asterisk. Shift's over. Be there in 20. Order a pizza. Asterisk. I sat on my couch, my heart hammering against my ribs, and stared at the door. I waited. The sound of his key scraping in the lock was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The door swung open, and Mark filled the frame, smelling of sweat and warehouse dust. He blinked his eyes, adjusting to the light. He saw the black trash bags first, a mountain of them blocking the entryway. "What the hell?" he mumbled, dropping his own duffel bag. "Did you clean?" "In a way," I said, my voice steady. I was standing by the couch, arms crossed. "That's your stuff. You need to take it and leave." He stared at the bags, then at me. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. Very funny, Vic. I'm exhausted. Move this crap so I can get in. He tried to shoulder his way past me. I didn't move. I planted my feet and held my ground. I'm not joking, Mark. You're out. Tonight. His smile vanished. What are you talking about? I live here. No, you don't, I said, the words coming out colder and harder than I expected. You crash here. You eat my food, you use my power, you make a mess, and you don't pay a dime. This isn't your home. It's mine. And your stay is over. His face contorted with anger. You can't just kick me out, Dad told me about the plan. You're supposed to be finding a new place so I can take this one. Don't be a bitch about it. There it was. The casual, entitled confirmation that I was just a stepping stone for him, a problem to be solved for them. The last bit of familial softness in me evaporated. There is no plan, I spat. That was Dad's delusional fantasy to get you out of his house. This is my apartment. Mine. And you are trespassing. I grabbed the top bag, the one with his stupid PlayStation in it, and shoved it out the door into the hallway. It landed with a heavy plastic thud. What the fuck? He roared, lunging for it. I was already on the next bag, shoving his stinking work clothes out after it. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. Stop it. What is wrong with you? I wrenched my arm free. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? You're 32 years old, Mark. Get your own life and get the hell out of mine. It was ugly. We were screaming at each other in the doorway, my voice hoarse, his face purple with rage. He called me selfish. He called me an ungrateful brat. He said I always got everything I wanted. I laughed in his face, a raw, bitter sound. I got this because I worked for it, I yelled, shoving the last bag of his junk into the hall. Something you wouldn't know anything about. He stood there panting, surrounded by the garbage bags that held his transient existence. Defeated. He knew he'd lost. Fine, he sneered. Fine. I don't want to live in this shithole anyway. Good. I held out my hand, palm up. The key. He scoffed. Forget it. Give me my key, Mark. Or I'll call the cops and have you removed for trespassing. Don't test me. I stared him down, pouring every ounce of fury and betrayal into my eyes. I wasn't his little sister anymore. I was a stranger. He stared back for a long, tense moment before reaching into his pocket. He didn't hand it to me. He threw it on the floor in the hallway where it skittered under one of the bags. Happy now, he snarled. Ecstatic, I said, and slammed the door in his face. I twisted the deadbolt, the click echoing in the sudden deafening silence. My legs felt like jelly. I slid down the door to the floor, my whole body trembling. I waited, listening to him curse and kick the bags before finally stomping away down the hall. And then nothing. It was over. I sat there for a long time, just breathing in the quiet air of my own apartment. I got up, picked up the empty pizza boxes and beer bottles he and his friends had left, and put them in the trash. I wiped down the counters. I opened a window, letting the cool night air chase out the last lingering scent of him. Nimbus, my cat, crept out from under the bed and cautiously rubbed against my leg, purring. I picked him up and buried my face in his fur. It was really mine again. The peace lasted exactly 47 minutes. My phone rang, flashing Mom on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Victoria, what have you done? Her voice was shrill, panicked. Mark just called me from the car. He's beside himself. He said you threw him out on the street. I asked him to leave my apartment, I said calmly. His things are in the hallway. He can take them back to his room at your house. His room, Victoria, the whole point was to get him times of his room. We had a plan A, perfectly reasonable solution that would have helped everyone. My blood ran cold. The sheer unadulterated selfishness of it still shocked me. Helped everyone? You mean it would have helped you and Dad? It would have cost me my home, my savings, and my sanity, but hey, at least you'd get your empty nest back, right? Don't you use that tone with me, she snapped. You're the one with the good job. You're the one who can afford it. It's your responsibility to help your family, to help your less fortunate brother. Less fortunate, or just coddled into incompetence. I was done being quiet. I was done being the good daughter. He's a 32-year-old man, Mom. My success isn't a slush fund for his failures. My stability isn't a resource for you to exploit for your own convenience. A choked silence on the other end. I don't know who this person is, she finally whispered, her voice thick with theatrical disappointment. This cold, selfish person. Your father was right. You've changed. Yeah, I have, I said, a strange sense of calm washing over me. It was the calm of a final decision. I'm no longer the family doormat. You all made it very clear that my happiness is disposable. So I'm disposing of the arrangement. What does that mean? She asked, her voice sharp with alarm. It means I need space. A lot of it. Don't call me, don't text me. I'll reach out when and if I'm ready. Victoria, you can't be serious. We're your family. I hung up. I blocked her number. Then I blocked Dad's. Then Mark's. I looked around my little 400 square foot box. The sage green walls. The fairy lights. The thrifted furniture I'd poured my heart into. It was a battlefield, and I was the only one left standing. I had won back my sanctuary. The cost was the family I thought I had, but I was beginning to realize you can't lose something that was never really there for you in the first place.
Story 6. I know what you think of me. I know the names you'd call me if you knew who I was. And you'd be right. I destroyed my family. I cheated on a good man and had a baby with a stranger. There's no excuse for what I did, but I need someone to hear the story from my side. Not for forgiveness, just for a second to understand how a person can get so lost they'd burn down their own house just to feel the warmth. Before all this, my life looked perfect. My husband, let's call him David, is a genuinely good person. We had 2 beautiful little boys, a nice house in the suburbs. I had a career I loved. From the outside, we were the American dream. But on the inside, I was disappearing. When our first son was born, a piece of me vanished. I wasn't me anymore, I was Mom. When our second son came along, another piece chipped away. I became a collection of functions: chef, maid, nurse, chauffeur. I loved my boys with an ache so deep it hurt, but the love was tangled up in the crushing, endless routine of their needs. David saw a functioning household. He'd come home from work where he was still a person with a name and a purpose, and see that the kids were fed, the house was clean, and his wife smiled on cue. He never saw the person behind the smile who was silently screaming. He never saw that I was drowning in the quiet. It wasn't a loud, dramatic depression. It was a slow, creeping fog. It muffled the whole world and made me feel like I was watching my own life through a thick pane of glass. Then COVID hit and I lost my job. That was the last part of my old self, the last thing that connected me to the person I used to be. Suddenly, I was nothing but mom and wife 24/7. The fog got thicker. I'd spend whole days not speaking to another adult until David got home, and by then he was tired. And I was so numb, I couldn't even form the words to explain how empty I felt. How do you tell the man you love that his perfect life feels like a cage? Last year, David had a work conference in Philadelphia. He couldn't go, but the trip was already paid for, so he suggested I go instead. A long weekend all to myself. A break. He thought it would be a gift. I thought maybe I could breathe again. But I just packed my emptiness into my suitcase and took it with me. I spent the first day wandering around a city full of people who were laughing and talking and living, and I had never felt more invisible in my life. That night I went to the hotel bar. I didn't want to drink, I just wanted to be around noise. I sat in a corner watching people and felt like a ghost. Then a man sat down a few seats away. He smiled. He wasn't trying to pick me up, not at first. He just started talking to me. He asked my name. Not if I was married, not if I had kids. Just my name. And when I said it, it sounded strange, like a word I hadn't used in years. We talked for hours. He was just a guy passing through town on business like me. He was black, funny, and he listened. He saw a woman sitting at a bar, not a collection of duties. For one night I wanted to feel something. Anything other than the crushing numbness. I wanted to do something that was just for me, something that wasn't for my husband or my kids. It was a selfish, stupid, and self-destructive impulse. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about passion or love. It was a scream into the void. A desperate, ugly act by a woman who just wanted to feel real. The regret hit me before he had even left the hotel room. It was a cold, sick feeling in my stomach, a horror at what I had just done. I flew home the next morning and threw myself back into my routine, praying I could bury it, to pretend it was just a bad dream. A few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. The sick feeling turned into pure terror. I lived on a knife's edge for months, praying for a miracle. I told myself that genetics are weird, that maybe the baby would look enough like David that no one would know. I held on to that stupid, impossible hope. But when I gave birth to my daughter, there was no more pretending. She was perfect. Tiny, beautiful, with a head of dark curly hair and skin the color of warm honey. And she looked nothing like my husband or my sons. When David looked at her and then looked at me, his face didn't change. There was no anger, no shouting, just a quiet, awful click as everything fell into place for him. The silence in that hospital room was the loudest sound I've ever heard. My whole world broke in that silence. I confessed everything. There was no point in lying anymore. The truth was right there in my arms. He filed for divorce right away. But we're still here, living in the same house. We can't afford for one of us to move out, and honestly, I'm such a wreck, he's worried about me being alone with the kids. We are living in the wreckage I created. And the cruelest part of it all is his grace. He helps with the baby, my baby. He holds her, he feeds her, he changes her. When his own mother made a disgusting comment about her, he cut her off completely. He defends this perfect, innocent child from the racism of our family and friends. They think her race is the sin. They don't get it. The sin was mine and mine alone. My boys adore their little sister. They don't see color, they just see their baby. And watching David with them, teaching them to be gentle with her, to protect her, it breaks me. He's worried they'll grow up and hate her because of what she represents. He's already teaching them to love her fiercely, to be a wall around her. He is being a father to a child that isn't his in a way that I'm too broken to be a mother to any of them right now. Now he's insisting we find her biological father. He says she deserves to know her history, to have access to her medical information. He says it's the right thing to do for times her asterisk. So he ordered an Ancestry DNA kit. He wants me to help him search to reach back into that one night in Philadelphia and find the man whose last name I don't even know. He wants to bring the cause of all this pain right to our doorstep because he thinks it's what's best for my daughter. The man I betrayed is trying to clean up my mess to build something decent for our children from the ashes. We spit in the tubes a few weeks ago and sent them off. I've been dreading it every single day. I check my email with a feeling of pure doom waiting for the notification. This morning I was feeding the baby when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was an email with the subject line, "Your Ancestry DNA results are in." David was in the other room with the boys. I just stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest, feeling like I was standing on a cliff, and the ground was finally about to give way. I took a shaky breath, the baby shifting in my arms. My whole body felt like it was humming with electricity. I could hear David in the living room, the cheerful sound of the TV show he was watching with our boys. It was so normal, so peaceful, and I was about to shatter it all over again. I walked out of the kitchen, my phone clutched in my hand like a bomb. "David," my voice was a whisper. He looked up from the couch, his smile fading when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I just held out the phone. He took it, read the subject line, and all the color drained from his face. He gently took the baby from my arms and handed her to me, then stood up. "Let's go to the office." He led the way, shutting the door behind us. The sounds of the cartoons were muffled now a world away. We sat in front of the computer side by side, not touching. He put my daughter Times Our Times daughter in the bassinet next to the desk. He logged into the website with steady hands I didn't understand. I felt like I was going to throw up. The page loaded full of charts and percentages. My heart was a drum against my ribs. David clicked on DNA relatives. And there it was. Not his name, not the man from the bar, but a name listed as a first cousin. A woman. Below her name was a projected age and a location. Not Philadelphia, but close. My breath hitched. It was real. A real person, a real family connected to my daughter. David was silent for a full minute, just staring at the screen. I expected him to get up and leave. I expected him to finally yell. Instead, he just let out a long, slow breath. "Okay," he said, his voice flat. "This is the first step." He clicked on her profile. There was a picture. A smiling woman who looked nothing and everything like the man I barely remembered. And there was a button. Message. "I can't," I whispered. "David, I can't do this." He turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his composure. His eyes were bloodshot. "We have to," he said, his voice raw. "This isn't about us anymore. This is about her. She needs this. She needs to have the option to know." He took the keyboard. "What do we say?" I was useless, a frozen statue of guilt. He did it himself. He typed out a message, his fingers moving slowly but deliberately. It was short, polite, and devastating. He explained that we believed her first cousin was the biological father of our newborn daughter, born on this date. He said we were seeking medical history, and if the father was willing a line of communication for the child's sake. He didn't use my name. He just said, "her mother." He read it out loud to me, asked if it was okay, and I just nodded, unable to form words. He hit send. The waiting was the worst part of my life. Every buzz of my phone made me jump. For 2 days there was nothing. We moved around each other like ghosts in the house, the unspoken thing hanging in the air between us. David was quiet, but he was still there. He'd take the baby for hours so I could try to sleep. He'd make sure I was eating. He was taking care of me while we waited for the grenade I'd thrown into our lives to finally explode. Then on the 3rd day I got an email. It wasn't from the cousin. It was from a man. The subject line was just my daughter's name. My heart stopped. He said his cousin had forwarded him the message. He said he was shocked. He said he remembered that night in Philadelphia. And he gave me his phone number. He said to call him when I was ready. I showed the email to David. He read it, then looked at me. "We should call him together," he said. An hour later, we were back in the office, the baby asleep in her bassinet again. David was sitting next to me, the phone on speaker between us on the desk. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. It rang twice. "Hello," a voice said. The voice from the bar. I froze. David reached over and squeezed my arm, a silent command to speak. "Hi," I croaked. It's me. From Philadelphia." There was a long pause. "Wow. Okay. Hi." He sounded normal. Not angry, not scary. Just like a guy who just had his world turned upside down. "My name is Marcus." And then I had to tell the story. With my husband sitting next to me, I had to explain that I was married, that I had gone home and discovered I was pregnant, and that I had a daughter. A beautiful, healthy little girl. David didn't say a word. He just sat there, a pillar of impossible strength, while I confessed my failure to the stranger I had shared it with. Marcus was quiet for a long time after I finished. "A daughter," he finally said, his voice thick. Is she okay?" "She's perfect," David said, speaking for the first time. His voice was steady and clear. It made Marcus jump on the other end of the line. This is my husband," I stammered. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a building. "Look," David said, taking charge. "I know this is a shock. We're not asking you for anything right now. Not money, not anything. But our daughter deserves to have her full medical history. And she deserves to know who her biological father is, if you're ever open to that." They talked for another 20 minutes. David asked about his family's health history. Marcus answered everything. He was stunned, overwhelmed, but he was decent. He has no other children. He isn't married. He kept saying he needed to think. He promised to send a detailed family medical history. Before he hung up, he asked one more question. "What's her name?" I told him. He repeated it softly, then said, "Goodbye." The call ended. The room was silent again. The awful, suffocating silence. David didn't look at me. He just stared at the wall, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. Then his shoulders started to shake. It wasn't loud, just a quiet, gut-wrenching tremor. He buried his face in his hands and he just broke. For the first time since that day in the hospital, he cried. Not in anger, but in pure, unfiltered pain. The sound of his grief was the price of my actions, and it was a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. I didn't dare touch him. I just sat there, drowned in the horror of what I'd done to this good man. He is filing for divorce, but he still sat by my side and helped me contact my affair partner for the good of a child that isn't his. He absorbed that blow for her and for me. That was a week ago. Marcus sent the medical history. David is talking about setting up a trust for her in case Marcus ever wants to contribute. He's already thinking 10 steps ahead, building a world for this little girl, trying to stitch together the pieces I shattered. I am still here in the house I destroyed, watching the man I betrayed lovingly build a future from the wreckage. I don't know if he will ever forgive me. I know I will never forgive myself. All I can do now is try to be the mother my children deserve, and honor the grace of a man who has shown me a love I never earned, and a kindness I will never be able to repay.
Story 7.
My brother's wife probably thinks I'm some kind of monster. I guess that's fair from her side. But people only ever see the final act. They don't see the year of silent suffering that leads up to it. They don't see what it's like to be me. My name is Michael. I'm an ER doctor. For the last 2 years, that has meant living in a constant state of emergency. My life is a soundtrack of beeping machines, coughing, and the sound of families getting the worst news of their lives through a phone. I go to work, I fight a war, I lose more often than I win, and then I come home. And for the longest time, coming home was just as bad. Home was this big, quiet house that felt haunted by my failed marriage. My wife Stephanie and I had been separated for over a year before we finally started the divorce paperwork. People think a marriage ends with a big fight, a dramatic affair. Ours didn't. It just died. It was a slow, quiet death by 1,000 little cuts. A forgotten anniversary here, a resentful sigh there. We stopped talking, then we stopped touching, then we just stopped seeing each other, even when we were in the same room. By the end, we were just two strangers who hated the way the other one breathed. The silence in that house after she left was deafening. My son, my 6-year-old, is the only thing that kept me going. But honestly, most days I feel like I'm failing him too. I come home exhausted, mentally and physically broken from the hospital, and I have nothing left to give. I'm just a ghost, walking around making sure he's fed and put to bed on time. Then she started coming over. My brother, Greg's wife. When her office went fully remote and my son's daycare closed, it just made sense. She could work from my place and watch him. I've known her forever, since she was just the quiet girl who was friends with Greg's crowd. She was always just there. A steady, calm presence in the background. When Greg married her, I remember feeling this little twist in my gut. It wasn't jealousy. It was more like recognition. Like, of course. Of course, he ended up with her. He found his anchor. Having her in my house changed everything. The silence was gone. I'd come home from a 12-hour shift, braced for that awful quiet, and instead, I'd hear her laughing with my son in the living room. She didn't just put him in front of a TV. She built forts with him. She read him stories. She helped him with his little homework packets. She filled my house with a warmth it hadn't had in years. She brought it back to life. Our interactions were always brief. Hey, thanks again for today. No problem, he was great. His spelling is getting really good. Just logistics about my son. But in those few minutes every evening as she was packing up her laptop and I was trying to decontaminate from the hospital, I felt more of a connection than I had in the last 5 years with Stephanie. I started living for those 3 minutes. I started seeing the life I was supposed to have, the partner I should have chosen. This wasn't some cheap fantasy. It was a realization. It was like a light turned on in a dark room, showing me that the miserable little corner I'd been living in wasn't the only option. The feeling grew from gratitude to respect, and then it turned into something I couldn't ignore anymore. I was in love with her. Admitting that to myself was the hardest and easiest thing I've ever done. It was the truth. And once I saw it, I knew I couldn't keep living the lie of my marriage to Stephanie. My feelings for her gave me the courage to finally end things for good. You can't hold a truth like that inside forever. It starts to poison you. Every time I saw her, it got harder to just say thanks and let her walk out the door. I started reading into things. The way she'd smile when I walked in, a real, genuine smile. The way she'd ask how my day was and actually listen to the answer. I convinced myself she felt it too. How could she not? She was bringing my home back to life, and I was the only thing keeping her from a life of true happiness. She was the peace to my chaos. We were a perfect match, and my brother was just a placeholder from her past. Last week I came home and the pressure was just unbearable. I'd had a horrible day. Lost a patient who was younger than me. I walked in and there she was, humming to herself while she wiped down the kitchen counter. My son was asleep on the couch. The scene was so perfectly domestic, so peaceful. It was everything I wanted. I knew I couldn't let another day go by without telling her. It wasn't fair to me, to her, or even to Greg. Everyone deserved to know the truth. My heart was beating out of my chest as she started gathering her things. "Don't go yet," I said. My voice sounded strange. She stopped looking at me with that gentle, questioning expression, and it all just came pouring out. I didn't plan it, I just let the truth speak. I told her I was in love with her. I told her that coming home to her and my son was the only thing that got me through my days. I told her that she was the reason I finally had the strength to divorce Stephanie, because she showed me what real partnership, real warmth looked like. I needed her to understand this wasn't some silly crush. This was real. This was the most real thing in my life. I remember saying something like, "I understand your year with Greg," trying to show her that I got it, that she had obligations, that I wasn't expecting her to just pack a bag and leave him tonight. I just needed her to know. I needed the truth to finally be out in the open between us. I laid it all out, my entire broken, bleeding heart. Her face just went blank. The warmth was gone. It was like a mask of polite shock fell over her. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she just shook her head a little, mumbled something about Greg needing her home for dinner, and she was out the door before I could say another word. She fled. At first I told myself it was fine. Of course she was shocked. I had just dropped a bomb on her life. She needed time. She needed space to think, to process what this meant for her, for us. To let what her heart was feeling catch up to the reality of her situation. So I gave her space. The next day she texted, *, so sorry, can't make it today, swamped with work. *. The day after that, another excuse. It's been a week now. A full week of her being too busy to come over. The silence in the house is back, and it's 100 times worse than before. My son keeps asking when she's coming back to build Legos with him, and I don't know what to tell him. I've put everything on the line for one moment of pure, terrifying honesty, and I'm being treated like a creep. Greg hasn't called or texted, which is the only thing giving me any hope. It means she hasn't told him. Why wouldn't she tell him unless a part of her was considering it? Unless she was scared of the truth too, she must be fighting it. I did this because when you're drowning, you have to reach for the one thing that looks like a life raft. And now I'm just floating in the wreckage waiting. My phone just buzzed on the counter. I picked it up, my heart jumping, hoping it was her. It wasn't. It was from Greg. Asterisk. Can you talk? Asterisk. My stomach dropped. For a whole week I'd been living on this thin, stupid thread of hope that she hadn't told him. That the silence meant she was thinking, considering weighing her comfortable life against a real passionate one. That text message cut the thread. I typed back my thumb, shaking slightly. Asterisk. Yeah. I can talk. Asterisk. I suggested he come over. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if he saw the space where she had brought so much life, he'd understand. Maybe it was a punishment for myself. My phone rang almost immediately. It wasn't a call, it was another text. Asterisk. No. I'm not coming to your house. Meet me at the park by the river in an hour. Asterisk. The coldness of it was a slap in the face. We'd been brothers for 38 years. We didn't meet in parks. We went to each other's houses. This was different. This was a business meeting for the end of a relationship. When I got there, he was already on a bench staring at the water. He didn't look angry, not in the way I expected. He just looked tired. Old. I suddenly realized how much she had hurt him by telling him, and a sick part of me was glad she had. It made things real. I sat down, leaving a careful space between us. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. She told me what you said, he finally said, his voice flat. He didn't look at me. Greg, Don't he cut me off. Just don't start with your excuses. I want to understand one thing. Why? Why would you do that to her? To me? Here it was. The moment to make him see. It wasn't about hurting you. I started trying to keep my voice steady. My life. Greg, you have no idea what it's been like. The hospital is a nightmare I can't wake up from. My marriage was a ghost. I was drowning. And then she was there. She brought light back into my house. Into my son's life. Into my life. I told him everything. About the silence, about Stephanie, about how coming home and seeing her was the only good part of my day. I tried to explain that it wasn't a choice. It was a truth that grew inside me until I had to speak it or it would have killed me. This wasn't some cheap shot, man. I fell in love with her, I said, my voice cracking a little. She showed me what a real partner is. I told her because she deserved to know that someone saw her, really saw her, for the amazing person she is. She deserves a love like that. Greg finally turned to look at me, and his face was just blank. There was no sympathy there. A love like that, a love that ambushes her in her brother-in-law's kitchen, a love that makes her feel unsafe in her own family, that's your grand gesture. You don't understand. No, Michael, you don't understand. His voice was suddenly sharp-cutting. You think you're the hero of some tragic romance. You're not. You're just a sad, lonely man who decided to blow up my life because you couldn't handle your own. Every word was a punch. She's been a wreck all week, he went on, his voice low and furious now. She feels violated. She keeps asking me what she did wrong, what signals she gave off to make you think that was okay. You didn't see a lifeline. You saw a woman being kind to your kid, and you built a whole fantasy around it because you're too much of a coward to fix your own life. That's not true. My feelings for her are what gave me the strength to leave Stephanie, I shot back, desperate. Greg just laughed a bitter, ugly sound. Oh, that makes it so much better. You used my wife as a justification to end your own failed marriage. You projected all your hopes and dreams onto her without ever once stopping to think about her. About what she wants. About her life. About me. He pointed at his chest. Your brother. He stood up looking down at me. She told me what you said. I understand your year with Greg. What the hell does that even mean? You think our marriage is just some placeholder? You think you know anything about us? You know nothing? You saw what you wanted to see? I had nothing to say. He was twisting it all, making it ugly. He wasn't seeing the purity of it, the honesty. We're done, Michael, he said. The words hung in the air. Don't call me, don't call her. You're not to come to our house. I don't want you anywhere near my wife. My parents will want to know why you're not at Thanksgiving. You can figure out what lie you want to tell them. I'll just tell them the truth. He started to walk away. Greg, wait, I called out, my voice sounding pathetic. She didn't tell you right away. She waited a week. Doesn't that mean something? He stopped and turned back, and the pity in his eyes was worse than the anger. It means she was so horrified and confused she didn't know how to tell her husband that his own brother had done something so selfish and destructive. It meant she was trying to protect me from you. Then he was gone. I just sat there on that bench for I don't know how long. The world I had built in my head, the one where she and I would eventually find our way to each other, had been bulldozed in 5 minutes. It's been a few weeks now. The silence in my house is a physical thing. It has weight. It presses down on me. My son still asks about her. Is she still busy at work, Daddy? He asked last night. I had to look my own child in the eye and lie telling him she got a new project and couldn't come anymore. The look on his face broke a piece of me I didn't even know was left. I lost everything. I thought I was making a noble sacrifice, laying the truth at her feet. But I didn't just lose her. I lost my brother. I lost the last bit of family I felt connected to. I destroyed the one peaceful thing in my life because I couldn't stand to see it from a distance. I had to try and own it. I know I'm supposed to feel guilty. I know I'm supposed to see myself as the villain they think I am. And sometimes in the middle of the night I do. But mostly I just feel angry. Angry that she wasn't brave enough. Angry that Greg couldn't see past his own pride. I showed her a door to a better life, a life of real passion, and she was too scared to even look through it. I was drowning and I reached for the life raft. It's not my fault they decided to chop it up for firewood. It's not my fault they chose to let me sink.
Story 8.
My husband's job is to find the truth, but the truth he looks for is always ugly. He's a private investigator. For years I watched him bring home stories of cheating spouses, embezzling partners, and hidden lives. He was good at it. He could spot a lie from a mile away. The problem was, he never turned it off. Our marriage didn't feel like a partnership. It felt like a long-term investigation where I was the primary subject. For the first few years it was fine, but slowly he stopped seeing me and started seeing patterns. A credit card charge for a lunch he didn't know about wasn't just lunch. It was an anomaly. A late night at work wasn't just a deadline, it was a deviation from the schedule. Our conversations became little more than him collecting data. How was your day wasn't a question, it was a request for an alibi. Our bed, which used to be our sanctuary, felt like two separate islands. He was there physically, but his mind was always somewhere else, sifting through evidence, leaving me completely and utterly alone in the quiet of our perfect-looking home. A deep, heavy sadness settled over me, a depression so quiet I could barely name it myself. He never even noticed. Then I got the new job. It was in sales, a high-pressure environment, but for the first time in forever I felt alive. I was good at something again. I had a purpose that wasn't just the PI's wife. And that's where I met David. I honestly couldn't stand him at first. He was loud, a little arrogant, and way too confident. But he was also the first person in years who looked at me like I was a person, not a puzzle. He saw that I was smart and ambitious. When I had an idea, he didn't poke holes in it. He helped me build it up. He listened when I talked about the suffocating silence at home, and he didn't offer a 5-point plan to fix it. He just said, "That sounds incredibly lonely. I'm sorry." It was like a dam broke inside me. I had a friend. A real one. That's when the small lies started. They weren't meant to be malicious. When I told my husband I was going to a coffee shop to catch up on emails, I was actually meeting David for lunch. I just needed a space for myself, a conversation that wasn't going to be filed away and analyzed later. Those lunches were my lifeline. We talked about work, about our pasts, about everything and nothing. I could laugh a real deep belly laugh and not feel self-conscious. I felt like myself. The big work trip to Florida was a major turning point for us at work and for me personally. We were getting ready to pitch a huge client. The week before, feeling a surge of confidence I hadn't felt since my 20s, I bought a new bathing suit. It was a bright blue two-piece, something a little more revealing than I would normally wear. I bought it for me. I wanted to sit by the hotel pool after our meetings and feel the sun on my skin and feel good. Not for David, not for anyone. For me. My husband found it in my suitcase while I was packing. He held it up not with a smile or a compliment, but with a flat, unreadable expression. "When did you get this?" he asked. The question wasn't curious, it was accusatory. I saw the gears turning in his head. Asterisk new variable. Unexplained purchase, motive unknown. Asterisk. I panicked and said the first stupid thing that came to mind, something about a friend giving it to me. I knew it was a weak lie, and the look he gave me confirmed it. He didn't press it, but he logged it away. Another piece of evidence. The work we were doing with David got more intense. We needed a place to spread out papers and work late without the office gossips watching our every move. So we started booking hotel rooms. It sounds exactly like what it was, I know, but at first it truly was just for work. We called it our war room. We'd order food work for hours and brainstorm. But in the privacy of those quiet, generic rooms, the lines began to blur. The work talk would drift into personal talk. The air would get thick with everything we weren't saying. One night after we'd landed a huge part of the project, we were celebrating with cheap champagne in paper cups. He looked at me, and he really saw me. He saw the tired, lonely woman behind the successful salesperson. And then he leaned in and kissed me. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but it was also the first time in years I had felt anything close to passion. It was the first time someone had touched me without it feeling like a routine. After that, there were no more lines. The emotional affair became physical. It wasn't love. It was a desperate grab for connection. A terrible mistake fueled by years of emotional starvation. Over the next 6 months, we met in hotels about 10 times. Each time I felt a horrible mix of guilt and relief. The day before my wedding anniversary, I was the one who booked the room. The date on the calendar felt like a mockery, a reminder of the emotional desert I was living in. What I had with David wasn't right, but it was a fire, and I was so cold. That last Saturday morning feels like a dream now. My husband was home sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and looking through case files. I told him I had a last-minute training session for work across town. He just nodded, his eyes not even leaving the papers in front of him. He didn't ask where or what it was for or when I'd be back. He just accepted my data point and moved on. The entire drive over my stomach was in knots. I knew I had to end it. I couldn't live in two separate worlds anymore. I pulled into the parking lot of the Comfort Inn, found a space, and killed the engine. I sat there for a minute, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and walked into the sterile, quiet lobby. I sent a quick text to David. "I'm here." I had no idea my husband had put a GPS tracker on my car a week ago. I had no idea he was sitting in his own car across the street, watching, waiting for the final piece of evidence to fall into place. My phone buzzed in my hand a few seconds later, but it wasn't a reply from David. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. My husband. I stared at it frozen. Why was he calling me right now? I declined the call, my hand shaking, and my phone immediately buzzed again. This time a text. Asterisk. I know you're in the lobby. I'm outside. Come out here so we can get this over with. Asterisk. Get this over with. It wasn't the message of a heartbroken husband. It was the summons of an investigator who had closed his case. The air left my lungs. The world tilted. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, even though the lobby was nearly empty. I looked up and saw him through the glass doors, standing by his car, his arms crossed. He wasn't angry. He wasn't crying. He was just waiting. Patiently. Like he was waiting for a suspect to turn themselves in. Every survival instinct screamed at me to run, to go up to the room and hide, but I knew it was pointless. He had me. I walked toward the doors like a woman walking to her own execution. The moment I stepped outside, the cool morning air felt like a slap. "It's not what you think," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It was a stupid, panicked thing to say, and the look he gave me confirmed it. He didn't even flinch. "Get in the car." The drive home was the longest 10 minutes of my life. The silence was so heavy I could feel it pressing on my chest. He didn't look at me. He just drove his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I kept replaying his text in my head. Asterisk. Get this over with. Asterisk. He had known. He had been collecting his evidence, building his case against me, and that morning was just the final piece of the puzzle. I wasn't his wife in that car. I was his perpetrator. The next 6 weeks were not a conversation. They were an interrogation. He didn't scream or yell. It was worse. He was calm, methodical. He sat me down at the kitchen table and laid it all out like a case file. The GPS data from my car. The bank statements with lunches I had lied about. A timeline of every late night, every business trip. He had facts. He just needed the confession. "Who is he?" he asked. "How long? What did you do?" Every question felt like a trap. I was so terrified. I saw the man I married disappear, completely replaced by a cold, calculating stranger who only wanted to confirm his own worst suspicions. So I did what any cornered animal would do. I lied to protect myself. I told him about David, but I downplayed everything. I told him we'd only ever kissed that one time in the hotel room. I told him the other times were just for work. I was trying to give him an answer that would stop the questions, that would maybe, just maybe, leave a tiny crack open for us to find our way back. But he didn't want a way back. He wanted the whole ugly truth. My partial confession wasn't enough. It didn't fit all the data points. For 6 weeks he chipped away at me. He'd bring it up at random times. While we were watching TV, while I was making dinner. "Your story doesn't make sense," he'd say. 10 hotel rooms for one kiss. It's not logical. He accused me of trapping him in a marriage built on lies, but he was the one setting the snares with every question. During that time, I kept talking to David. I know how that sounds. But my husband had become my prosecutor, and I felt so completely alone. David was the only person on earth who knew what was happening. He was my only support system. I'd call him from the grocery store parking lot, crying, my world falling apart. We weren't planning more secret meetings. We were talking about how I could survive the interrogation. He'd tell me to stay strong, and I'd ask him how to hide our calls so my husband wouldn't have more evidence. It was a messed up, desperate attempt to hold on to the only person who had shown me any kindness while my life imploded. My husband called it tapering down, as if I was some addict he was trying to wean off a drug. He saw it as me trying to trick him to keep my connection to David alive behind his back. He didn't see it for what it was, a terrified woman trying to let go of her only lifeline before she drowned. The end came on a Tuesday night. I was exhausted. I hadn't slept properly in weeks. The weight of his suspicion was crushing me. We were in the living room. The silence stretched between us as always when he looked at me and said, "I just need the truth, all of it. Then we can decide what to do." I looked into his eyes, searching for a hint of the man I loved, for a trace of a husband who wanted to heal. I found nothing. There was only the PI waiting for the last piece of information to close his file. He didn't want to fix us. He wanted to be right. So I gave up. It was physical, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It was a sexual relationship. For about 6 months. I watched his face. There was no flash of new pain, no shock, just a slow, quiet nod. It was the look of confirmation, the look of a man whose theory had just been proven correct. He had his confession. Case closed. In that moment, I knew our marriage wasn't just broken. It had never been what I thought it was. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a subject he could trust. And I had failed his investigation. What I did with David was a terrible, destructive mistake. I blew up my own life out of loneliness and desperation. But the bomb was already there, ticking quietly in the space between us for years. He was just the one who finally documented the explosion. I had lost my marriage, my friend, and whatever was left of myself. And the worst part was, I was still just as lonely as when it all began.
Story 9.
My dad was a phenomenal father. He was also a truly crappy husband. I know that's a hell of an opener, but there's no other way to say it. He was the guy who taught me how to throw a baseball, how to change a tire, and how to talk to girls without sounding like a complete moron. He was also the guy who cheated on my mother more times than I can count. You can't reconcile those two things. You just have to hold them both in your head at the same time and accept them as true. Growing up, our house was a stage, and my mother was the director. Everything was about appearances. The lawn had to be greener than the Hendersons. The Christmas lights had to be more elaborate than the Garcias. My sisters and I were props she dressed up in matching outfits for family photos that screamed, "We are perfect, we are happy." It was all a lie. I remember one Saturday when I was about 15. Dad was trying to hang a new ceiling fan in the den. He slipped on the ladder, came down hard, and sliced his arm open on a metal bracket. It wasn't a gusher, but it was bleeding badly. He yelled my name and I came running. "Grab the first aid kit from the kitchen, buddy," he said through gritted teeth, pinching the wound shut. I ran into the kitchen. My mother was standing at the counter, calmly arranging a bouquet of lilies in a crystal vase. She didn't even look up. "Mom, Dad's hurt." "He's bleeding," I said, yanking the kit out from under the sink. "Is he getting it on the new rug?" she asked, her voice as cool and smooth as the marble countertop. "Tell him to use a towel." I just stared at her. Not an ounce of concern. Not a flicker of emotion. My father, the man whose credit card had paid for the rug, the vase, and the goddamn lilies, could have been bleeding out in the next room, and her only concern was the upholstery. That was their marriage in a nutshell. It wasn't a marriage, it was a business partnership. I didn't learn the real terms of their deal until last year when the doctors gave Dad the 6-month warning. Pancreatic cancer. A real son of a bitch. I was sitting by his hospice bed, the room smelling of antiseptic and fading hope. He'd lost so much weight, his clothes hanging off his frame like they belonged to a bigger, healthier man. But his eyes were still sharp, still had that glint of mischief. "You know why I never left your mother, David?" he asked out of the blue. His voice was a dry rasp. "I figured you stayed for us kids," I said. It was the story I'd always told myself. He gave a weak, rattling laugh. That was part of it. At first. But the main reason, blackmail. I felt my eyebrows shoot up. "What are you talking about?" "Early on, maybe 10 years in, I'd had enough," he said, adjusting his oxygen tube. I told her I was done. I was going to file for divorce. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you do that, I will tell the police, our friends, and our families that you beat me. I'll say you hit the kids, I will destroy you." The air in the room went cold. I couldn't speak. "I knew she'd do it," he continued, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. "She's a brilliant tactician, your mother." She knew nobody would question a crying woman. And I'd have lost everything. My job, my reputation. You kids. So we renegotiated the terms of our contract. Contract. She got the house, the lifestyle, the social standing. She got to be Mrs. Perfect Wife with the perfect family. In exchange, she looked the other way. She knew about my extracurricular activities. She didn't care as long as I was discreet and the checks cleared on the first of the month. She traded love for leverage. He finally looked at me, and I saw a lifetime of regret and resignation in his eyes. I was a coward, Dave. I should have fought her. But I was young and scared. So I paid her price. And I tried to make up for it by being the best damn dad I could be. He was. He never missed a game. He always had time for my stupid problems. He loved me and my sisters fiercely. A love that felt all the more real and desperate compared to the emotional vacuum of our mother. He wasn't a good man, not in the traditional sense. But he was a good father. The last 2 weeks were a blur of morphine drips and whispered conversations. During that time, he was always scribbling in a worn leather notebook. Sometimes, he'd let out a short, sharp laugh, then wince in pain. "What are you writing?" I asked him one afternoon. "My last will and testament," he coughed, a grim smile playing on his lips. "Not the legal one your mom's lawyers have that's sewn up tight. This is more of a spiritual declaration. My side of the story." The day before he died, he called me into his room. My sisters were in the hall crying quietly. He was lucid, frighteningly so. The cancer had eaten away his body, but it hadn't touched his mind. He gestured to a thick, sealed manila envelope on his bedside table. "That's for you," he rasped. I picked it up. It felt heavy, important. My name was written on the front in his shaky script. "It's my eulogy," he said, locking his eyes on mine. The force of his stare was immense. "And you are going to read it at my funeral." "Dad, I don't. Dad, I don't." "Don't argue with me," he snapped, a flash of his old authority returning. "Not now. She's had the microphone for 30 years, David. She's controlled the entire narrative. This is my one chance to set the record straight. My one chance to have the last word." He started coughing, a deep, ragged sound that shook his entire body. I held a cup of water to his lips. "It's all in there," he whispered when he could speak again. "The good, the bad, and the ugly. It's funny. It's vulgar. It's profane. But it's the goddamn truth. And you are going to get up on that podium and you are going to read every single word of it." He grabbed my wrist with a surprising strength. His skin was paper thin, but his grip was iron. "Promise me, David, no edits. No chickening out because you're afraid of her reaction. You read it exactly as I wrote it. Promise me you'll honor my last wish." I looked at my father, the man who was both a hero and a villain in my life story. I saw the desperation in his sunken eyes, the plea for one final act of loyalty. It wasn't a request. It was a dying man's last command. "I promise, Dad," I said, my own voice cracking. A small, genuine smile touched his lips for the first time in weeks. He squeezed my hand, then let go, his energy spent. He closed his eyes and slipped into a sleep he wouldn't wake up from. And I was left standing there holding the bomb he had built, knowing he had just made me the one to light the fuse. The church was suffocating. It smelled of lilies, my mother's choice of course, and performative grief. I stood at the podium, the polished wood cool beneath my trembling hands. The manila envelope felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Out in the pews, I could see my mother dabbing at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, the perfect grieving widow. My sisters, Sarah and Chloe, sat beside her, their faces pale and tense. They knew what was coming. I'd shown them the eulogy the night before. I cleared my throat, the sound echoing in the cavernous silence. "My father wrote something," I began, my voice unsteady. "He asked me to read it." unedited. I saw a flicker of confusion on my mother's face, quickly replaced by a placid, condescending smile. She probably thought it was going to be some sweet, sentimental deathbed letter. She had no idea. I broke the seal on the envelope and pulled out the folded pages, my father's familiar spiky handwriting staring up at me. I took a deep breath. Showtime. To anyone who's actually sad, I'm gone. Thanks for coming, I read. A few nervous titters rippled through the crowd. To anyone who's just here for the free sandwiches, they're in the back. Try the roast beef. My dad's father, Grandpa Joe, let out a loud snort. My mother shot him a look that could curdle milk. I kept reading. They say you should speak well of the dead. Lucky for you, I'm the one speaking and I can say whatever the hell I want. I was a good father. I was a terrible husband. If you're shocked by that, you haven't been paying attention for the last 30 years. The air in the church shifted. It became heavy charged. I didn't dare look at my mother. I just focused on the words. My marriage to the lovely woman in the front row, you know, the one who looks like she's auditioning for a tragedy, was a masterclass in transactional relationships. She provided the beautiful home and the picture-perfect family. I provided the money. All of it. A collective gasp went through my mother's side of the family. Her parents, my maternal grandparents, looked like they'd been slapped. Early on, I wanted out. She informed me that if I filed for divorce, she would fabricate a story of spousal and child abuse that would ruin my life. It was a brilliant, cold-blooded move. So I stayed. And in exchange for my financial loyalty, she granted me a certain freedom. As long as I was discreet and the mortgage was paid, she didn't care who I spent my nights with. Our marriage wasn't a sacred vow. It was a non-disclosure agreement with a hefty price tag. I paused to turn the page. The silence was absolute. Everyone was staring mouths agape. I risked a glance at my mother. Her face was a mask of white-hot fury. The grieving widow was gone. A killer had taken her place. Grandpa Joe was shaking with silent laughter, tears streaming down his face. He caught my eye and gave me a huge approving wink. I soldiered on my voice, gaining strength with every word of my father's truth. She traded love for leverage, and I was too much of a coward to call her bluff. That's on me. I failed as a husband, but I'd like to think I succeeded as a dad. To David, Sarah, and Chloe, you were the only real things in my life. The only part that wasn't a lie. I love you. I finished with his final line. So that's that. Don't cry for me. I'm finally out of the contract. Now somebody get Grandpa Joe a damn whiskey. I folded the papers, placed them back in the envelope, and walked down from the podium. I didn't look at anyone. The walk back to my seat felt a mile long. The service ended abruptly after that. No one else seemed to have anything to say. The fallout was immediate. As people were filing out, my mother cornered me near the vestibule. Her face was contorted with a rage I hadn't seen since Dad dented her Mercedes. You idiot, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. You stupid, selfish boy. You've humiliated me. You've ruined this entire family. I was honoring his last wish, I said, my voice flat. His last wish was to be a vindictive bastard, and you were his little puppet. Her parents flanked her, their faces grim with disapproval. Your father was a philandering pig, my maternal grandmother spat. And you were just like him. He was a good man, Grandpa Joe roared, stepping up to my side. He smelled faintly of the flask I knew he kept in his coat. He was a good man, trapped by a damn vampire, and David here just let a little sunlight into the crypt. My mother ignored him, her eyes boring into mine. This is it, David. This is the last time you will ever speak to me. And you can forget about your sisters. You will never see them again. I will make sure of it. It was her ultimate weapon. The one she'd held over my dad's head his entire life. The threat of taking his children. But she wasn't dealing with my dad anymore. No, you won't, I said calmly. Her eyes narrowed. Just watch me. Right on cue, Sarah and Chloe came and stood beside me. Sarah, 21, and legally her own woman, crossed her arms and stared our mother down. Chloe, a week away from her 18th birthday, looped her arm through mine. That's not going to work anymore, Mom, Sarah said, her voice steady and cold. You don't control us. Chloe leaves for Stanford in August, I added. And I'll be helping her move in. You don't have any leverage. The contract is void. I used Dad's word. Asterisk. Contract. Asterisk. I saw it land. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother look completely and utterly defeated. Her power, the carefully constructed illusion she had maintained for 3 decades, had evaporated in the space of 10 minutes. All she had left was public shame and 3 children who now saw her for exactly what she was. She stared at the 3 of us, a united front she never anticipated. Her mouth opened, then closed. There were no more threats to make. No more cards to play. She turned without another word, her parents trailing behind her like defeated sycophants, and swept out of the church. We stood there for a moment, in the sudden quiet, the 3 of us. The bomb had gone off. The smoke was clearing. Grandpa Joe clapped me hard on the shoulder. Your father would be so damn proud of you, kid, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I nodded, unable to speak. I looked at the faces of my sisters, and I knew I had done the right thing for them for my dad. But as the adrenaline began to fade, a cold, heavy feeling settled in my gut. I had honored my father. I had set his truth free. But I had also detonated our family, leaving nothing but rubble and scorched earth. And I was the one left standing in the wreckage, wondering if the cost of one man's final word was worth a lifetime of war.
Story Teen. I know what he told you. I know how he framed it, how he made me out to be the villain who shattered his world while he was overseas serving his country. It's a simple story, and it's effective. He's the hero, I'm the cheater. But our marriage didn't break because of one night in September. It was already broken. The truth is, he's the one who gave me the pieces. He likes to start the story in 2018 when he deployed. But our story starts years before that in a high school hallway. It starts with him cheating on me. I know, we were kids. Everyone says it doesn't count. But it does. It puts a crack in the foundation that you can never really fix. You can paint over it, pretend it isn't there, but it's always waiting for the first tremor to split everything wide open. I took him back. I loved him, and I believed him when he said it was a mistake. But the trust never fully came back. It was gone. A year later, he was joining the Marines. We got married right after he finished boot camp. I was 18. It all happened so fast, a blur of a courthouse wedding and promises whispered between packing boxes. In his version, it was probably romantic. For me, looking back, it felt less like a celebration and more like he was locking me down before he left, staking a claim, making sure his property would be right where he left it when he came home. Then he was gone. And I was suddenly 19 in a new town near his base, with no friends, no family, and a husband I only knew through a crackly phone line. The loneliness was a physical thing. It was an ache in my chest that never went away. I was a Marine wife. That was my entire identity. People didn't ask my name, they asked for his rank. I stopped being a person and became an attachment. The fight started small. He'd get jealous if I mentioned going out for coffee with another wife from the base. He needed to know who, where, for how long. The calls became interrogations. Did I threaten to divorce him? Yes, more times than I can count. It's the one part of his story he gets completely right. But he never understood why. They weren't real threats, they were screams for help. I was drowning and I wanted him to see it. I wanted him to fight for me, to tell me not to go, to remind me why we got married in the first place. I wanted him to show me that I was more than just an obligation, a box he'd checked before deployment. He never did. He'd just get angry, tell me I was being selfish, that he was the one in a war zone. He never got that I was in one too. A different, quieter kind. I tried to feel like myself again. I'd buy a new dress, something that made me feel pretty alive. I'd go out with the few friends I'd made. Sometimes I'd forget to put my ring back on after a shower. He'd see a picture on social media and the text would come immediately. Why aren't you wearing your ring? Who are you all dressed up for? He never once said, "You look beautiful." He saw a nice outfit and a missing ring as proof of my betrayal. I saw it as a desperate attempt not to disappear completely into the beige walls of our base housing. By September 2018, I felt like a ghost. The fighting was constant. We were just two angry, lonely people shouting at each other across an ocean. Levi wasn't part of some grand plan to hurt him. I wasn't looking for an affair. Levi was just there. An old friend from high school from before all of this. He was in town visiting family, and we reconnected online. Talking to him felt easy. He asked about my hobbies, my dreams, things my husband hadn't asked about in years. He saw me not just a Marine's wife. Going to his house was stupid. It was a moment of absolute weakness. I told myself it was just to talk, to feel normal for an hour. To sit on a couch with another human being and not feel like I was being watched or judged. We were just catching up. Nothing happened. But I knew even then that I was crossing a line I shouldn't. Then my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced down and my heart stopped. A message from my husband. Underneath it was a map with a pulsing blue dot showing my exact location. My live iMessage location. I had sent it to him by accident. Thousands of miles away, he was watching me sit in another man's house. The blood drained from my face. I knew his rage. I'd heard it on the phone, felt the anger vibrating through the receiver. The thought of facing that, knowing there was nothing I could do to de-escalate it from the other side of the world, was terrifying. My phone started ringing. His name flashed on the screen. I answered, my hand shaking. His voice was cold, dangerously calm. "Where are you?" Panic took over. Logic went out the window. All I could think about was surviving the next 5 minutes, delaying the explosion I knew was coming. The first pathetic lie that fell out of my mouth was about my old iPad. "I'm at home," I stammered. That must be my old iPad. I left it at Levi's house a long time ago. I guess he turned it on. The service here is so bad it must be messing up the location. It was a terrible lie. A child's lie. But I was so desperate, so scared. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. It stretched for what felt like an eternity. I held my breath, waiting for the screaming. For a second I thought, maybe, just maybe, he bought it. He sounded tired when he finally spoke. "Okay," he said, his voice flat. "Okay, I have to go." and he hung up. I sat there, shaking the silence of the room, screaming in my ears. The immediate crisis was over, but I knew it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much, much worse. For a day, there was nothing. An unnerving radio silence from his end. I almost let myself believe I'd gotten away with it. Then my phone lit up. A new message from him. It wasn't words. It was a screenshot. A picture of my Instagram profile page. And right there under my name it said my account was still linked to Levi's. Underneath the screenshot, a single line of text from my husband appeared. Explain this. My heart hammered against my ribs. A screenshot of my Instagram. How could I have been so stupid? It was an old link from years ago when the app first asked to connect accounts. It meant nothing, a digital ghost I hadn't even known was there. But to a man thousands of miles away, a man I had just bald-faced lied to, it was a smoking gun. Explain this. How do you explain a technical glitch to a hurricane? How do you say, it's just a thing the app did to a man who now believes you're capable of anything I tried? I typed out frantic, rambling messages about how I didn't know how to unlink it, how it was an old setting, how it didn't mean anything. My words felt weak and pathetic even as I typed them. Each message I sent was met with cold, one-word replies. Sure. Okay. Right. He didn't believe me. Of course he didn't. The lie about the iPad had poisoned everything. From that moment on, I wasn't his wife anymore. I was a suspect. Every call became an interrogation. He'd ask the same questions over and over, just with different words. Who was I with? Who had I talked to? Why did I take 20 minutes to answer his text? He'd demand I FaceTime him to prove I was at home. His eyes scanning the background of the video for any clue that didn't fit. It was suffocating. He was fighting a war over there, but he was waging a whole other one on me. When he finally came home from deployment, the relief I thought I'd feel never came. The war just moved into our living room. He brought the detective with him. He'd pick up my phone when he thought I wasn't looking, scrolling through my messages, my call history. He'd ask casual-sounding questions about my day that were loaded with suspicion. If I mentioned a male coworker's name, his whole body would tense up. I was living on a knife's edge, constantly trying to prove my innocence for a crime I hadn't even committed. And for 2 years I held that line. I insisted nothing happened at Levi's house, because nothing physical had. I had gone there for a conversation, for a moment of connection in my crushing loneliness. That was the truth. But the bigger truth was that I had lied to him, panicked and scared, and that lie became the ghost that haunted our marriage. He couldn't let it go. It was a scab he had to keep picking at, convinced that if he just dug deep enough, he'd find the infection he was so sure was festering underneath. We had our son. He was my world, the one bright, beautiful thing in the middle of all this ugliness. I looked at his little face, and I saw a reason to keep trying to hold our fractured family together. I thought if I just loved my husband enough, if I was patient enough, if I was transparent enough, we could get past it. I deleted my social media. I stopped going out with friends. I made my world as small as possible, hoping it would make him feel secure. But it didn't. His suspicion wasn't about my actions anymore. It was about his own pain. He was looking for a reason to justify the hurt he felt. And my lie was the perfect excuse. The fighting never stopped. It just got quieter, more bitter. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Every accusation, every suspicious glance, every time he brought up that day in September chipped away at me. I was exhausted. I was tired of defending myself, tired of walking on eggshells, tired of living with a man who looked at me like I was a stranger he couldn't trust. I was tired of being the villain in his story. The story that in his mind had only one possible ending. 2 years after he'd come home, we had another fight. It was the same one we'd had 100 times. It started with me getting a text from a friend and spiraled into him accusing me of hiding things, of lying, of having a secret life. I just stared at him, my body feeling heavy and numb. I had no fight left in me. I just wanted it to be over. All of it. Later that night, as I lay in bed, listening to him breathe, I realized he would never let this go. He needed me to be the cheater. He needed me to confess to the story he'd already written in his head because it was the only way his pain made sense to him. He couldn't face the fact that our marriage was broken long before that day, that he had handed me the first cracked piece himself. So I picked up my phone. My fingers moved across the screen, my thumb hovering over the send button. I just wanted peace. Even if it was the peace that comes from total destruction. I gave him what he wanted. I gave him the ammunition he'd spent 2 years searching for. I typed it out. You were right. I'm sorry. I cheated on you in September 2018. I hit send. The explosion was immediate, but this time I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel anything. It was almost a relief. I had finally surrendered. I let his version of the truth become the official story. He tells everyone he's broken now, and I know he is. I see it. What he doesn't see, what he will never admit, is that we are two broken people holding jagged pieces of the same shattered thing. He looks at the piece in my hand, the lie, the betrayal of going to another man's house, and calls me the one who destroyed everything. But he refuses to look at the piece in his own hand, the one he created all those years ago in that high school hallway. He doesn't understand that he broke the foundation first. He's the one who gave me the first deep cut, and he should not be surprised that eventually I bled.
Story 11. I met Daniel where all good girls in my town met their future husbands. The 1030 a.m. service at Grace Chapel. He was new, visiting with his cousin, and he had that clean-cut, earnest look I was raised to believe was the hallmark of a God-fearing man. He had kind eyes and a firm handshake. And when he said he was looking for a church home, a little voice in my head whispered times, "This is it. This is him." Asterisk. Our first date was for coffee after service the following Sunday. He was magnetic. He talked about his mission trip to Guatemala, his volunteer work at the youth center, and his desire for a family built on a foundation of faith. The words poured out of him, a perfect script of everything I'd ever prayed for. The most important thing to me, he said, leaning forward over his lukewarm latte, is purity. Honoring God with our bodies and our relationship until we're married. I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost knocked me over. I dated guys who'd pushed, who'd wheedled, who'd made me feel like an old-fashioned prude for holding on to my convictions. But Daniel got it. He didn't just accept my boundaries, he shared them. He was in a word safe. The courtship was a whirlwind. It was 9 months of hand-holding during movies, chaste kisses on my front porch, and long talks about the future. We planned our dream home, named our hypothetical children 2 boys, 1 girl, and read devotionals together over the phone. He was everything. Respectful, charming, and deeply spiritual. My parents adored him. My friends were jealous. I was floating. When he got down on one knee in the middle of the town square, a tiny velvet box in his hand, I didn't hesitate. Saying yes was the easiest decision I'd ever made. Our wedding was small and quaint, exactly what I wanted. We held it in the little chapel where we met, surrounded by our closest family and friends. I remember the scent of the white roses on the altar, and the way the afternoon light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting us in jewels. When Daniel slid the simple gold band onto my finger, his hands were steady. He looked into my eyes and promised before God to love and cherish me in sickness and in health for the rest of his days. I believed him. I believed every single word. The bliss was intoxicating. We drove away from the reception with tin cans clattering behind our car, my head on his shoulder, a future as bright and shiny as my new ring stretching out before us. We were starting our honeymoon with a road trip down the coast, a week of charming inns, scenic overlooks, and finally being truly together. The first few days were a dream. We were clumsy and shy, and everything I'd imagined my first time would be sweet and sacred. We drove with the windows down, singing along to the radio, stopping at every kitschy roadside attraction we saw. On day 3, we pulled over at a viewpoint overlooking the ocean. The cliffs dropped dramatically into the churning blue water below, and the wind whipped my hair across my face. Daniel grabbed his phone. "Stay right there," he commanded, a wide grin on his face. "You look beautiful." He snapped a few pictures, the sound of the digital shutter lost in the roar of the waves. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated happiness. I was a wife. His wife. "Oh, let me see," I said, running over and wrapping my arms around his waist. He handed me the phone without a second thought. I was smiling in the picture, my eyes squinting against the sun, the ocean, a perfect backdrop. He'd captured the moment perfectly. He'd captured me times perfectly. I was about to tell him so when the screen lit up with a notification banner at the top. An unsaved number. The text was short. Asterisk. Thinking about last night. Can't wait for you to be home. Asterisk. My blood went cold. My smile froze on my face. It was probably just spam. A wrong number. It had to be. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. He was leaning against the guardrail, looking out at the water, his back to me. "Yeah, fine." I managed to choke out my voice thin. "Just admiring your photography skills." He chuckled, oblivious. My thumb hovered over the message app icon. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Asterisk. "Don't do it, Angela. Trust your husband. Don't be that wife." Asterisk. But I couldn't stop myself. My thumb tapped the green icon. The text was at the top of a long, long thread. I tapped on it. The contact was just a string of numbers, no name. My eyes scanned the last few messages, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. My breath hitched. "Her times. Have the best time with your wife. Just remember who was keeping your bed warm the night before." Asterisk. "Him times. Always. You know you're the one." Asterisk. "Her times. Prove it when you get back." Asterisk. There were pictures. Explicit pictures. Things I'd never even considered doing, let alone with someone I wasn't married to. Pictures of her. Pictures of him. Pictures of them together. I started scrolling up, a desperate, sick feeling churning in my stomach. I scrolled past yesterday. Past our wedding day. Past the week before. The month before. The conversations went back and back and back. 9 months. The entire time I had known him. He was sleeping with her when he asked me to be his girlfriend. He was sleeping with her when he told me he loved me. He was sleeping with her the day he bought my engagement ring. He was sleeping with her the night before he stood at the altar and promised to forsake all others. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. I felt the bile rise in my throat. Every chaste kiss, every prayer we'd said together, every promise of purity, it was all a lie. A sick, elaborate performance. I wasn't his respected, cherished bride. I was his gullible religious cover story. I scrolled and scrolled a spectator to my own destruction until I saw it. A text from Daniel sent from our rehearsal dinner while I was in the bathroom. Asterisk. Wish you were here instead. Can't wait to see you tonight. Asterisk. I stopped breathing. He left the dinner early. He told me he was feeling overwhelmed and needed to get a good night's sleep before the big day. I'd kissed his forehead and told him I understood. I'd felt a rush of love for my sensitive, thoughtful fiancé. He hadn't gone home to sleep. He'd gone to her. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I looked up from the screen, my vision blurry with tears I hadn't realized were falling. The world tilted on its axis, the beautiful ocean view turning into a nauseating, spinning vortex. I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. Ready to head to the hotel, baby, Daniel's voice was cheerful light. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. I'm starving. I just stood there, paralyzed, his phone gripped tight in my hand, its screen a glowing testament to the ruins of my entire life. His arms felt like a cage. My body went rigid. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the sickening warmth of his hands on the skin of my arms. He was touching me, kissing my hair, while the proof of his monstrous betrayal was burning a hole in my hand. I twisted out of his embrace, stumbling back a step. I held up the phone. The screen was still lit up, a neon sign broadcasting my ruin. His smile vanished. Angela, what? Don't, I whispered. The word came out like broken glass. I shoved the phone at his chest and turned walking blindly toward the car. The drive to the hotel was 20 minutes of suffocating silence. He kept opening his mouth to speak, then closing it. I stared out the passenger window, watching the postcard-perfect scenery blur into a smear of green and blue. Every tree, every crashing wave felt like a personal insult. How dare the world be beautiful when mine had just ended? The hotel room was disgustingly romantic. A 4-poster bed strewn with rose petals, a bottle of cheap champagne chilling in a bucket, a honeymoon suite. I wanted to set it on fire. Daniel closed the door behind us, the click of the lock echoing in the room. Baby, you have to let me explain. Explain what I spun to face him, my voice finally finding its volume. Explain the 9 months of text, the pictures. Or should we start with the night before our wedding? Explain how you left our rehearsal dinner to go sleep with her. The color drained from his face. He looked like I'd physically struck him. Good. It's not what it looks like, he stammered, the classic pathetic defense of a guilty man. It looks like you're a liar, I spat. It looks like you stood in a church in front of God and my family and made a mockery of me. Of everything I believe in. All that talk about purity, honoring God, was that all just a performance? Was I just the religious idiot you could trick into playing the part of your wife? He sank onto the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. I was going to end it, I swear. After we got married, it was going to be over. Oh, how noble of you, I laughed a harsh, ugly sound. You were going to grant me the honor of being your only woman times after times you'd already sealed the deal. After I was legally and spiritually trapped. It's not like that. I love you. No, you don't, I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. You don't love me. You love the idea of me. The good Christian girl who would give you the perfect-looking life while you did whatever you wanted on the side. I walked over to him, my whole body trembling with a rage I didn't know I was capable of. Get your phone. He looked up, confused. What? Get. Your phone, I repeated through clenched teeth. You were going to end it. Fine. End it. Right now. in front of me. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't over. It was never going to be over. "Do it," I commanded. With shaking hands, he pulled the phone from his pocket. He unlocked it and opened the message thread. I stood over his shoulder watching. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard. "Tell her it's over," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Tell her you're married and you can't ever see her again." He typed deleted and typed again. Finally, he wrote times. "I can't do this anymore. I'm married." Asterisk. He hit send. We both watched the screen waiting. The 3 little dots appeared almost immediately. My stomach churned. Her reply was instantaneous. Asterisk. "What the hell are you talking about, married? You were with me 2 nights ago." Asterisk. There it was. The final confirmation. The other nail in the coffin of my 9-month fairy tale. She was just as blindsided as I was. He hadn't just lied to me, he had lied to everyone. I backed away from him, a cold, hollow feeling spreading through my chest. Divorce. The word screamed in my head. A scarlet letter in the world I came from. A public failure. A sin. Asterisk. What God has joined together, let no one separate. Asterisk. The verse was branded on my soul. Daniel saw the conflict on my face. He saw his opening. "We can fix this, Angie," he said, his voice turning soft and pleading. He stood up, trying to take my hands. I snatched them away. We made a covenant. Before God. For better or for worse. This is the worst. We just have to work through it. God hates divorce. He used my own faith as a weapon, twisting the blade. And I stranded 1,000 miles from home, humiliated and utterly broken, let him. I had no friends here. No family. No money of my own. All I had were my vows. And they felt like a life sentence. That was the end of our honeymoon and the beginning of our marriage. The next 4 years were a masterclass in misery. The charming, God-fearing man I'd fallen for was gone, replaced by a sullen, cruel stranger. He never hit me, but his words left bruises no one could see. I was stupid. I was needy. I was no fun. I was lucky he'd even bothered to stay with me after I'd violated his privacy and ruined our honeymoon. He held that over my head like a guillotine. I withered, I lost weight. I stopped talking to my family much because I couldn't bear to lie anymore, and I was too ashamed to tell the truth. Grace Chapel became a place of judgment where I felt every eye on my hollow cheeks and joyless smile. The change happened slowly. I started visiting a different church on the other side of town, a little community church with a woman pastor and a killer coffee hour. I didn't talk to anyone for months, just sat in the back. But then a woman named Sarah invited me to her book club. I went. And for the first time in years, I talked to people who didn't know Daniel, who didn't see me as half of a broken whole. They just saw me. They made me laugh. They reminded me what friendship felt like. With their support, a little bit of my spine grew back. It started with small things. Daniel came home one night and sneered at the dinner I'd made. "Is this all there is?" he asked, poking at a piece of chicken. The old me would have apologized and offered to make something else. The new me looked him dead in the eye. "If you don't like it, feel free to make your own dinner." He was so stunned he didn't speak for the rest of the evening. It felt like a superpower. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. I started making plans with my friends from the new church without asking his permission. He hated it. The docile, controllable wife he'd curated was disappearing, and he didn't know how to handle it. A man like Daniel can't stand a woman he can't control. One Tuesday afternoon, I came home from having coffee with Sarah to find a suitcase by the door. "I can't do this anymore," he said, not looking at me. "You're not the woman I married." "You're right," I said, a wave of profound, earth-shattering relief washing over me. "I'm not." He left. Just like that. 3 months later, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a picture posted by one of his cousins. It was Daniel on one knee, proposing to a woman with a perfectly round pregnant belly. The caption read, "Times?" She said yes. "Can't wait to welcome another member to the family?" Asterisk. I looked at the picture. I looked at the happy, smiling couple about to start their family on a foundation of lies, just like we had. But instead of the gut-wrenching pain I expected, I felt nothing. Just a quiet click as the last lock on my cage sprang open. His divorce lawyer called mine the next day to expedite the proceedings. Today I have my own small apartment, a job I love, and friends who feel more like family than my actual family ever did. I'm working on myself. I'm healing. And sometimes late at night I think about that girl standing on the cliff, her whole world crumbling. I wish I could tell her that the worst day of her life was actually the first day of her freedom. Daniel thought leaving me was his final act of punishment. He had no idea it was the greatest gift he ever could have given me. I have never ever been happier.